As confetti rains down, the streets erupt in celebration for the hero's return. Pushing through the adoring crowd, a man named Verna tries to maintain order, warning people to stay back. He watches the celebrated hero with a weary sigh, overwhelmed by the intense atmosphere. Verna grits his teeth in frustration, muttering under his breath about the cause of all this commotion. His friend, the hero Mazel. Mazel plays to his audience, flashing a charming wink that sends the crowd into a frenzy. The crowd swoons, excitedly chattering about the hero's attention. Verna can only watch, annoyed by the noise but admitting to a twinge of jealousy. The bartender welcomes him as he steps inside. He pushes through the lively patrons, making his way to a secluded spot. Verna quietly announces his arrival to the person waiting for him. The hooded figure reveals himself to be Mazel, greeting Verna by name. Verna wryly asks if it is appropriate for the celebrated hero to be in such a place. Mazel retorts with a grin, questioning if a viscount like Verna should be there either. Mazel mentions he already ordered their usual drinks, much to Verna's delight. Verna acknowledges that much has happened. Mazel raises his mug, proposing a toast to his friend's safe return. The two happily clink their mugs together and take a hearty drink. After their drink, the two friends share a laugh. Verna comments that this lively tavern suits him far better than the stiff formalities of his position, reflecting on his friendship with hero Mazel. Mazel simply notes that everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. Verna reminisces about his first impression of Mazel, thinking he was the kind of person he would never associate with. But life, he muses, is unpredictable. Being in this world, in this moment, is the greatest proof of that. He recalls his past life as an ordinary Japanese man who died by a stroke of bad luck. One day, he simply awoke as a child named Verna in a new medieval world, much to the relief of his new mother. This phenomenon is commonly known as reincarnation. As his new parents fussed over him, Verna was still disoriented. His new father and mother looked down on him, calling him Verna. He came to a shocking realization. He had been reborn into the world of a royal RPG he used to play. He recalled that a major problem was set to arise in the latter half of the game's story. He knew that an attack orchestrated by the Demon Lord's forces would soon bring ruin to the capital city. That tragedy was fated to unfold right where he now lived. As a member of a minor noble family not even mentioned in the game, he was just an ordinary character. This meant there was a very high chance he would die in the coming event. He refused to accept such a meaningless death. And so, he resolved to protect himself. He began practicing martial arts with relentless dedication. Time flew by as he honed his skills, preparing for the dark future he knew was coming. Verna is engrossed in a book when a friend greets him, commenting on how serious he always looks while reading. Verna denies being serious, but his friend playfully asks for tutoring, claiming he does not understand politics and science. His friend continues to tease him, calling him the top honor student of his class. Verna quietly thinks that his reputation is not as impressive as it seems. His skills and knowledge are merely carryovers from his previous life and desperate survival training. His friend points out that girls look at him with hungry eyes, but Verna insists it is only because of his family's status. However, as he thinks about actual popularity, his gaze drifts towards another student. He watches Mazel Harding, the most talked-about student in the academy, surrounded by admirers. Verna recognizes him as the hero of the game, a commoner who became an honor student through his unique abilities, making him a subject of widespread fascination. He laments the fact that he and the game's hero ended up as classmates. Mazel's enrollment is the official start of the game's plot. Because of this, Verna has committed to remaining an ordinary background character, determined not to interfere with the course of events. Verna reminds himself that he doesn't want to get involved. A young noblewoman charmingly offers Mr. Harding one of her country's boastful confections. Mazel politely accepts her offer. From a distance, Verna watches the scene unfold with intense suspicion. He recognizes the girl as an international student from Xanarak, the daughter of a duke. These frequent academy tea parties are a common place for students to find romantic partners. Ordinarily, Verna would pay no mind to someone trying to get close to a handsome man. However, his concern is piqued because he witnessed her drinking a suspicious medicine right before Mazel showed up. He suspects she tampered with the sweet she has been pushing on Mazel. He tries to convince himself to stay out of it and focus on his book, believing it is best not to interfere. He reasons that the hero would not fall for something so obvious, especially before the main story even begins. His thoughts are cut short when the girl exclaims in shock, asking Mazel what is wrong as his face grows terribly pale. Verna panics, shocked that Mazel actually ate it. He frantically looks around, wondering where the hero's escorts are, while trying to believe Mazel will be fine thanks to plot armor. The Duke's daughter worriedly checks on Mazel, who seems disoriented. Verna suddenly doubts his assumption. What if things are different from the game? He understands that the hero is the world's only hope against the Demon Lord, and he must survive. He realizes that for the sake of the world, he needs Mazel to become the hero he is meant to be. Verna quickly checks Mazel's condition and announces that his pulse and breathing are steady, suggesting he be taken to the Academy's medical office. The Duke's daughter is taken aback by his sudden intervention. Verna calmly apologizes, stating that the urgency of the situation compelled him to act. The Duke's daughter insists on taking responsibility and finding a doctor, implying her confections are to blame. Verna cuts her off, arguing that moving Mazel would be difficult and that her guilt is not yet proven. He tactfully suggests that holding a Duke's daughter responsible would cause unnecessary complications. He concludes that taking him to the Academy's medical office is the most sensible course of action. His decisive words leave the Duke's daughter and her friends stunned and unable to object. Relieved, Verna thinks to himself that he has secured the hero and supports Mazel as they leave. He overhears the girls whispering and realizes their plan was likely to abduct Mazel. With the immediate crisis averted, he contemplates what to do next. Mazel's escorts finally appear, much to Verna's irritation. He confronts them angrily, asking what good they are now. They try to justify their delay, citing the delicate situation involving a foreign duke's daughter. One of the escorts weakly mentions the risk of a diplomatic issue. Verna internally fumes, realizing they knowingly left the hero in a dangerous situation. He authoritatively gives them orders. One will report the incident, the other will find the duke's daughter, and he will take care of Mazel. The two escorts are stunned into silence, unsure how to respond. Losing his patience, Verna shouts at them to get moving. Startled, they immediately agree and rush off, leaving Verna to sigh in exasperation. Verna reflects on the disastrous poisoning attempt. He feels he should have intervened before the hero drank the poison, lamenting that in this peaceful world, a hero's true worth isn't appreciated. He silently questions if the hero is truly prepared for the devastating war that is to come. He worries that if the hero is targeted again, it could alter his journey and jeopardize the future defeat of the Demon Lord. Verna ponders what his next move should be. Mazel awakens, groggy and unsure of his surroundings. Verna appears from behind a curtain, checking to see if he is awake. Verna confirms that Mazel was served poison, but reassures him that the antidote should kick in soon. He offers him some water, urging him to rest more as Mazel absorbs the shocking news. Verna explains that the confections from the Duke's daughter were laced with poison. Mazel immediately worries about the girl, but Verna states she was perfectly fine. Verna confirms her malicious intent without a doubt. Mazel is shocked that she would attempt such a thing at the Academy. Verna reveals her true intentions. If he had not stepped in, she would have abducted Mazel and taken him to the embassy. Verna warns that a scandal between a commoner and a Duke's daughter would have caused a huge fuss, likely ending with him being taken to Salznak. He advises Mazel to be more careful, as noble families can be ruthless. This elicits a small laugh from Mazel, who then points out that Verna himself is from a noble family. Verna asks if Mazel remembers who he is. Mazel smiles warmly, recognizing him as a classmate he had wanted to talk to. Seeing how pale Mazel still is, Verna tells him to go back to sleep. Internally, he's surprised Mazel is acting so normal, muttering about main character perks, which leaves Mazel confused. Suddenly, the door bursts open and a group of imposing men barge in. Their leader demands to know who Verna is and orders them to leave immediately, claiming the room for their own use. Verna's expression hardens as he prepares for a confrontation. Verna calmly requests that they quiet down, explaining that a student is resting. The leader is enraged by what he sees as an underclassman's brazenness. Verna realizes that no matter what he says, a fight is now unavoidable. The leader sizes Verna up, dismissing him as a student and assuming he is a hired guard. He suspects Verna is trying to hide the hero. As the man prepares to make his move, Verna acts first, smashing a piece of furniture with his foot to use as a weapon. Before the intruders can react, Verna lunges forward, striking the leader squarely in the face with his makeshift weapon. Verna stands ready for the next attack, knowing he must protect the hero. He knows he is at a clear disadvantage in both strength and numbers. His only choice is to hold them off until help can arrive. To Verna's astonishment, Mazel suddenly vaults over the bed and into the fray, unleashing a powerful kick. Verna looks on, completely surprised by the sudden intervention. The remaining intruders are caught off guard, as Mazel moves with blinding speed, striking them down one by one. With a flurry of perfectly executed blows, Mazel swiftly defeats all the remaining men. Verna watches the display, internally remarking that it was a perfect takedown. As the intruders lie unconscious on the floor, Mazel stands over them, victorious. Verna observes from the side, a new understanding dawning on him. Heroes are truly amazing. With the intruders dealt with, a cheerful Mazel asks Seifert if he is injured. Seifert reassures him, more concerned about whether Mazel should be moving around after being weakened. Mazel brushes it off, saying his hand is just a little sore, which Seifert finds crazy given his condition. Seifert is internally relieved that he can now explain the situation to a teacher and put the incident behind him. A teacher and his assistants arrive, horrified by the scene and demanding to know what happened. Seeing his teacher, Seifert calmly notes the nice timing. The teacher asks Seifert for an explanation, and Seifert agrees to provide the details. He starts by clarifying that the unconscious men are most likely not students of the academy. The teacher is shocked to hear they were attacked by the scoundrels. Seifert explains that it seemed to be a planned assault, though he doesn't know their motives. With a smile, he suggests the teacher interrogate them for more information when they wake up. The flustered teacher sends his aides, Roger and the other man, to fetch more help. Seifert inwardly decides to pass the rest of the matter on to his father. Seifert recalls that as a result of the incident, the precedent assistants resigned from their duties. A search for a new assistant began, and though people recommended him for the role, he quickly declined. His attempt to keep his distance was cut short when Mazel approached him with a request. To Seifert's surprise, Mazel began to attach himself to him, starting by cheerfully asking for a lesson on the etiquette for that day's ceremony. Feeling he couldn't just push him away, Seifert decided to endure his company, telling himself it was necessary to prevent more trouble. As Seifert reflects on their time at the academy, he realizes that they had become the best of friends while also being the worst of companions. The memories fade into a vision of a grim future, a battlefield overrun by demons, which Seifert calls the end of their endless battles. In that war-torn future, a beaten Seifert grabs a shocked Mazel by his cloak, fiercely telling him to listen. He begins to make a vow, questioning what they should do if they live in a world where Mazel is required to be the sacrifice. With tears and rain streaming down his face, Seifert declares that if the world demands such a sacrifice, then he will change that fate and the world itself. And so begins their story, the legend of a hero, and the tale of his devoted friend. One day, an ordinary salaryman woke up in the body of a child, reincarnated into the world of a role-playing game he once played about a hero defeating a demon lord. But for him, there was one very big problem. He had been reborn as an ordinary person destined to be killed in a massacre midway through the game's story, a fate he desperately wanted to avoid. Fortunately, he was reincarnated before the game began, allowing him to train relentlessly for his own survival. Complicating matters, the game's main character had, for some reason, taken a liking to him. Initially, Seifert tried to avoid affecting the plot, but over time he became the hero's friend. The protagonist, Mazel, was somewhat undependable and constantly found himself in trouble. Feeling uneasy, Seifert decided to fully support the hero, until the demon lord's defeat. And so, the first major event began to unfold, the monster stampede. An instructor at the academy announces that a monster stampede, an event that occurs every 20 years, is imminent, and that the students will provide support. Seifert recognizes this as the start of the game's first event. As the students discuss the news, Mazel admits to feeling nervous. The instructor explains that normally, such stampedes aren't a major threat if dealt with quickly. However, Seifert knows this time is different. Because of the Demon Lord's revival, the monsters are far more numerous and powerful, making this a major event. Seifert recalls the grim outcome of this event from the game. The approaching battle would wipe out all the knights in the capital and anyone with royal blood. He knows that at this rate, they are fighting a lost battle. The command will eventually be given for those of noble rank to retreat and await further instructions. The instructor continues his briefing, assigning students without ranks to support teams while noting Mazel will be handled separately. Seifert worries about the fate of the royal knights. As a noble, he knows he will be required to fight, putting him at high risk of death. He must devise a new strategy to survive. His intense focus is shattered when Mazel shouts his name, Verna. Mazel asks what's wrong, noting that Seifert hasn't moved since break time started. Seifert realizes he was too lost in his thoughts. He abruptly cancels their plans to visit a weapon shop, declaring that he's going home. He tells a stunned Mazel that he needs to recruit people and prepare for the war, brushing off his friend's confusion. Mazel playfully suggests following Seifert as usual, but Seifert insists he's always this serious. Mazel is taken aback. Seifert reminds him that as a noble, he'll be given different instructions, and they won't be together. Mazel is left speechless and confused by his friend's stark reaction. Seifert tells Mazel to just do what he always does, but to stay on guard. He knows that in the original story, this battle is where Mazel defeats the demons behind the plot and earns the title of hero. He gets Mazel's attention to give him some last-minute advice. He tells him to bring plenty of healing medicine and to dress properly, but Mazel thinks he's exaggerating. A fellow student nervously asks Seifert for advice. Seifert tells a nervous Cranak to follow orders and keep his bow ready. Mazel reassures another student that he'll probably be on the support team. As Mazel advises Miss Julina on her role as a magic user, other students ask for his opinion. Seifert cuts in with a serious warning for everyone to prepare their armor, just in case. As Mazel effortlessly recalls everyone's skills, Seifert is amazed by his memory. He reflects that this world has a skill system just like the game. While Seifert had to train relentlessly to obtain his spearmanship skill, Mazel's skill is something else entirely, the hero. The hero skill allows Mazel to use almost any combat skill, learning them instantly just by watching someone else. Seifert recalls crying when he first saw this cheat-like ability. He knows this event is designed to increase Mazel's battlefield experience, and he plans to have him use his skill as much as possible. But for Seifert himself, the only goal is to survive this battle safely. As they part ways, Seifert shouts one final reminder to Mazel not to forget the healing medicines. Mazel casually waves back, acknowledging him. Seifert watches him go, resolute that he must do everything he can to survive. He briefly wonders why his own father is not participating in the battle. His butler, Norbert, reminds him that his father is staying by the king's side. Back at his family estate, Seifert worries that his life is in even more danger now, knowing his father, a count and minister, would never be on the front lines. Norbert explains that Seifert has been nominally appointed as troop commander for the count families, much to Seifert's exasperation. Norbert clarifies that for now, Mr. Max Lyman is the actual commander. Seifert dismisses Norbert's attempt to reassure him, knowing that the count family's token participation only applies to small monster stampedes. He asks Norbert to call for Max. Seifert delegates the shopping and troop applications to the butler. He reflects on the gravity of the situation. This is a huge life-or-death event, and he doesn't know his own limits. Determined, Seifert vows to prepare in advance to ensure he comes out of this war alive. The Crown Prince's young son watches as the troops assemble. The Crown Prince rallies the troops, ordering them to depart. Seifert surveys the assembled forces, about 4,200 infantrymen, 200 mercenaries, and 100 students from the support team. He considers it a large-scale force, but a grim reality hangs over him. No one else knows that this is a lost battle. Max Lyman, the Seifert family's chivalry commander, expresses his concern that they have too many people for what should be a small battle. Seifert understands his commander's reaction, knowing that for most people, this event is treated like a casual picnic. He recalls the commander's shock when he requested 100 mercenaries, an excessive number for a simple monster stampede. Seifert knows it looks like he's overreacting. From his perspective, Seifert wants everyone to be more cautious, but he's satisfied they're following his orders. Ogden, a platoon leader, comments that the battle seems a bit plain for His Highness's first engagement. Seifert agrees with him. He knows the supreme leaders of this war are the Crown Prince and his son, the king's grandchild. And according to the game, despite their rights to the throne, both are destined to die. Seifert knows that the deaths of the only two heirs to the throne trigger the hero's great adventure. To avoid the incoming chaos, he is determined to ensure both heirs survive. He calls out to Max, who leans in to listen. Max reminds him it's time to give his greetings to Count Forst, who is right next to them. Seifert sighs in resignation. Seifert reflects on the relationship between his family, who are civilian officials, and the Forst family, who are military leaders. Despite a mutually beneficial relationship, there are still underlying tensions. Deciding he has no choice, he tells Max to come with him and instructs Ogden to look after the squads. He is determined to get this over with. Count Forst greets him, glad that the son of the Seifert minister could come. Seifert introduces himself as Verna. The Count acknowledges him and then instructs Max to look after the minister's son with great care. Seifert notes with bitterness that the Count calls Max by his name but refers to him only as the minister's son, making him feel insignificant. He understands that it's common for military heads to look down on civil officials and holds no grudge. From the Count's perspective, Max is more beneficial. Suddenly, Tyrone, the Count's eldest son, asks why Seifert's squad doesn't just work under his father's command. While Max finds the suggestion absurd, Seifert immediately refuses. Tyrone explains their reasoning. Since Seifert's forces likely can't handle things on their own, they should just do as they're told. Seifert understands their condescending logic. From their perspective, they believe they're doing him a great favor, oblivious to the strict social hierarchy that separates them. A knight in imposing black armor, whom Seifert recognizes as a count's daughter named Hermione, dismisses his squad's capabilities. She states that since they are merely students, it would be best for them to simply support her own forces from the rear. Hermione reiterates her advice, warning them not to overexert themselves. Seifert thinks to himself that her squad clearly had no intention of relying on them from the start. Despite his frustration, he puts on a cheerful face, thanking her for the consideration before turning to leave. An older man from his retinue reminds him not to cause the minister any worry. As Seifert's group walks away, another noble family observes them. A young woman tells her brother that his earlier phrasing was too harsh. Their father interjects, praising Seifert as an exceptionally reputable student and not just an ordinary heir. The daughter agrees, adding that he's said to be the only one in his family who can practice martial arts. However, her brother scoffs, dismissing his skill as merely spearmanship. The brother continues his condescending remarks, claiming that true knights use swords and that spears are for trainees. With a sinister smile, he openly speculates about who would become the next heir to the Seifert family should Verna die in action. His sister looks on, disturbed by his ambition. Seifert rejoins his own troops, looking drained by the encounter. Max Lyman, his large, scarred second-in-command, tells him it is time to go over the battle plan one more time. One of his platoon leaders, Ogden, notices Seifert's exhaustion and asks if something happened. Seifert deflects the question, reassuring his worried soldiers. Nearby, the second platoon leader, Barcy, remarks to Ogden about his impressive influence over the newly assembled troops. Ogden agrees, acknowledging their skill. Seifert prepares to address them, thinking about the command system he has put in place. He outlines his strategy, detailing a command structure designed for rapid communication through platoons and small groups. Seifert emphasizes that they must stick together and fight as a team, taking down one monster at a time. The troops listen intently. Seifert continues his speech, acknowledging that his soldiers likely view this as an ordinary monster stampede. While he understands their perspective, he gravely states his refusal to accept any unnecessary losses. With conviction, Seifert announces the primary goal for their squad in the upcoming battle, for everyone to come out alive. He knows this will be difficult, as his private thoughts reveal they must hold the line against the monster army until someone named Mazel defeats the final boss. Meanwhile, the hero Mazel checks his supplies, having gathered a large number of healing potions. His companions tease him for being overly cautious despite his great strength. As they are called to assemble, Mazel thinks back on Seifert's instruction to take as many potions as he could carry. He senses that when Verna says such things, there is a hidden danger that only he is aware of. Looking on with a serious expression, Mazel ponders the young commander's true intentions. He wonders what Verna is secretly planning. On the left side of the field, an officer from Count Seifert's squad relays the new orders. To minimize damage, they will engage monsters in groups of 5. Once a target is down, they are to immediately assist the next group. Captain Max explains the strategy to the platoon leaders as Verna looks on. Platoon leader Barcy expresses his confusion, stating that while he understands they are orders, he cannot grasp the reasoning behind them. He knows that the enemy is unlikely to accept one-on-one duels, and even if they did, his forces lack the cohesive teamwork for it. Verna understands his troops' confusion. In a world where individual power is everything, a plan to fight in small numbers would naturally make his soldiers feel they are being underestimated. A soldier reminds the others that this is His Highness's first battle. Verna agrees that they shouldn't overshadow him, though his troops seem frustrated by the cautious plan. He anticipates that the monsters could spawn for an entire day, making continuous fighting impossible. Barcy starts to grasp the logic, realizing that if the monsters gang up on them when they are fatigued, their losses will be immense. He asks Verna for confirmation of this strategy. Verna confirms his thinking, stating that to minimize casualties while securing victory, this plan is their best bet. Verna tells the troops to be ready to reinforce the other families. Ogden jokes that their squad will assist the Fruest family, which another soldier claims is just an excuse to see women. Verna playfully tells Barcy he'll leave that task to him. Internally, he knows they will treat it as a joke, but his intention to reinforce others is serious. As the troops chatter, Max observes that it's time to prepare for battle. Verna orders his troops to return to their positions. As they move out, he senses a distinct change in the atmosphere. The battle began shortly after their meeting. A few hours later, the field is engulfed in chaos. The battlefield descends into a scene of utter carnage as monsters tear through the ranks of soldiers. Just as the game predicted, the knights struggled. Troops were routed, and the death toll climbed. Panicked soldiers deserted the battlefield. But Verna's squad was different, holding their formation. He bellows orders for them to cooperate and watch their surroundings. His soldiers respond, calling out injuries and working together amidst the chaos. Verna relentlessly directs his troops, ordering them forward. He commands them to support each other and restore their teams, and they battle on systematically. Verna's body grows accustomed to the rhythm of battle, with no time to think or even wipe the blood from his face. He's thankful his training allows his body to move on its own. He shouts orders at his men to stay aware of their surroundings. He pushes himself to keep moving forward. He is relieved that everyone is following the plan. All they have to do is hold out until Mazel defeats the final boss. But around him, the desperate screams of dying soldiers serve as a grim reminder of the battle's cost. Verna observes soldiers from other squads fleeing the battle and wonders what he should do. He knows his team is too small to affect the overall outcome. He considers their strategic position between the elite knights on the right wing and the powerful Fruist squad on the left. If either of those larger forces collapses, his own squad's survival will be at stake. He knows it would be trouble if the other two squads perished. Sending backup seems wise, but he knows the proud Fruist family might reject them. Making a snap decision, he yells for Max to have the troops use the dead as cover. Max asks for new reports, and Verna explains that the other noble squads have been pushed back by monsters. He's already given orders to unify and reform any squads that meet. Suddenly, a piercing scream cuts through the din of battle. Without hesitation, Verna leaps into action, intercepting a ferocious monster attack to protect a fallen soldier. As monsters attack from behind, Verna charges forward. He shields a wounded soldier and asks if he's okay. The soldier thanks him and confirms that he is from the Fruist family's squad. Verna asks what happened to the rest of his squad, but the soldier can only say he was just trying to survive. Verna orders his men to treat the soldier's injuries. He sees that even a well-equipped soldier has been badly injured. He debates sending reinforcements immediately, but decides against it for the moment. Unwilling to let their efforts be wasted, Verna shouts for Barcy. He orders him to focus on restoring their power and then head to the Fruist family's side to provide backup. Meanwhile, on the right wing, Count Frust's squad is locked in a desperate battle for survival. Count Frust roars at his men not to falter, calling the monsters mere weaklings. Privately, he knows something is wrong with this year's stampede. His soldiers hold their ground, but the slaves are cowering in fear. He's stretched thin trying to stop his own people from deserting. He demands to know the whereabouts of Tyrone and Mine, but a soldier reports they haven't returned from the front lines. Seeing his forces scattered, the Count orders everyone to gather in the center of the field. He intends to reform the squad. Tyrone Fru hears his father's voice but can't make out the words through the noise. His companion warns that they've strayed too far from their troops and the situation is becoming dangerous. A monster lunges at Tyrone, but his sister Mine intervenes just in time, saving him. She asks if he is okay, and he admits that while she saved him, he has something to confess. Tyrone tells his sister they won't last much longer and urges her to go back to their father. He explains that even their talented soldiers are barely avoiding fatal wounds. As if to prove his point, a nearby soldier is overwhelmed by monsters and screams for help. Mine grits her teeth and orders those who can still move to follow her. She intends to retrieve the injured and return to their father, but hesitates. A soldier asks how they are supposed to retreat through the monsters. Mine shouts at them not to falter and to stay together. Internally, however, she is asking herself the same question. Mine knows that if they stop now, only death awaits. She resolves that they must focus on thinning the enemy's numbers. Their only goal is to fight their way back to her father. Stealing her resolve, she turns to face a massive winged beast blocking her path. Just as the monster attacks, reinforcements arrive. A commander orders his troops to stay in position and assist. Barcy rushes to Mine's side, asking if she's hurt. Surprised, Mine asks who they are. Mine apologizes for her rudeness and thanks them for the rescue. Barcy introduces himself, explaining that he belongs to the Seifert family squad and has come to assist under Mr. Verna's orders. Mine is stunned, finding it hard to believe. She recalls how these newcomers handled a situation that her own squad could not, turning the tide. One of Barcy's men proudly proclaims that their excellent handling of the situation was all due to Mr. Verna's orders. Mine processes this information. Barcy adds that other noble teams who suffered damage are now under their care. He politely suggests that it might be wise for her squad to retreat for the time being. Mine hesitates, recalling how her family views the Seifert family as shameful. Despite her family's pride, Mine realizes this is their only chance to recover. She accepts the offer, telling Barcy she will report to her father. Back with the main force, Verna notes that the Fruest family has likely joined his squad by now. Verna reflects that they've somehow made it through, but believes it's only because their enemies were weak. From his knowledge of the game, he knows the knights would not have been annihilated if the battle ended here, which means something else is coming. He can only hope that Mazel defeats the mastermind before that happens. A cry rings out that victory is theirs. Soldiers celebrate, telling Verna that the enemies are retreating. Verna is taken aback, wondering if Mazel defeated the final boss. He quickly dismisses the idea, reasoning that it couldn't have been that easy. Verna concludes that something else must be going on. He immediately barks orders at Max to gather the troops and distribute potions to the injured. When a soldier points out that the enemies have already retreated, Verna impatiently tells him to hurry and do as he's told. As the dust settles on the battlefield, the soldiers erupt in cheers, believing victory is theirs after a tough fight. Max approaches Verna, congratulating him on a plan that minimized their casualties and asks for the order to pursue the enemy. Verna remains silent, a grim look on his face. He finds the situation strange, as it doesn't align with the game's original storyline. A soldier reports to Verna that their enemies are retreating. Verna is alarmed, questioning if they retreated as a group rather than scattering individually. The soldier confirms they all headed towards the forest, which deepens Verna's suspicion. He immediately orders Max to gather all troops and distribute potions to the injured. Max questions the decision with monsters on the run, but Verna insists that their organized retreat is highly likely a trap. Verna declares that he is heading for the stronghold. Max acknowledges the order and watches him go. As Verna moves through the muddy, corpse-strewn battlefield, the stench of blood and insect fluids fills the air. Though already exhausted from the battle, Verna pushes himself onward. He questions why he is running so desperately toward the stronghold. He knows what happens next. He realizes it is because he is the only one who understands the true danger. As Verna reaches an entrance, guards halt his advance. He desperately tries to explain that he has urgent news for the Crown Prince, but is denied entry. The guards state he must speak with the left-wing commander first, but Verna knows it will be too late by then. He realizes that wasting any more time is not an option. He must find a way to meet the Crown Prince directly. From the stronghold walls, soldiers celebrate the monster's retreat, believing the ringleader has been defeated. They feel reassured, believing the reason the monsters weren't afraid of magic was due to the ringleader. Verna grows desperate, realizing everyone already thinks they have won. Nearby, a young boy calls out to his father, asking for orders to pursue the fleeing monsters. Spotting his chance, Verna pushes past the guards and shouts directly at the Crown Prince. He declares that he has something urgent to tell His Highness. Verna and the Crown Prince lock eyes, a tense silence hanging between the battle-worn soldier and the regal commander. The guards try to restrain Verna for his outburst. An aide to the Crown Prince intervenes, and the guard explains that Verna appears to be an aristocrat from the left wing. The Crown Prince orders them to let him in. He reasons that while they have the upper hand, the left wing suffered heavy damage, so the report must be important. Verna is then escorted forward by the guards. The Crown Prince coolly asks Verna to identify himself. Kneeling, Verna introduces himself as Verna van Seifert, from Count Seifert's family. The Crown Prince recognizes the name, noting he is the son of the Minister of Right, and asks what Verna has to report. After apologizing for his rudeness, Verna urgently pleads with the prince to have the soldiers retreat. The Crown Prince and his retinue listen with skepticism. Verna worries that, as expected, they don't understand what he's trying to say. He knows the game's storyline, but he is unsure if he can make them move as he wishes. As the other knights question his plea, the Crown Prince silences them with a single word. The Crown Prince asks Verna why he advises a retreat. Verna explains that the enemy's movement is strange. A nearby officer argues that since the ringleader was defeated, a retreat is natural, but Verna clarifies that they are receding, not routing. He points out that all of them, even the mindless insect types, are moving in unison. The Crown Prince listens intently. Verna elaborates that this isn't a retreat, but a trap to lure the knights into the forest. He explains that the enemies, mostly insects and beasts, can move easily in that terrain. In contrast, the heavily armored human army would be at an overwhelming disadvantage. Convinced, the Crown Prince immediately shouts for the bell to be rung, to recall the knights, and for all remaining personnel to regroup. The soldiers scramble to follow the Crown Prince's new orders. The Crown Prince asks Verna if there is anything else. Verna suggests that His Majesty's grandson be entrusted with protecting the royal capital's castle gates. The prince understands the subtle suggestion. He orders his aide to assist his son and the wounded soldiers to the defense of the North Gate. This allows his young son to return to the capital with dignity, without the need to spare extra soldiers for his protection. The Crown Prince asks if that is all, and Verna confirms. The prince then orders Lord Verna to return to his camp and join the main unit at the center, surprising him. The prince adds that he will let him know when the new deployment is over, as he will have more work for him. Verna returns to his squad. Max calls out to him, anxious for news. He informs them that the monster's retreat was a trap and that they should not pursue them too deeply. Verna explains that once the pursuing knights return, it will be an all-out war, and His Highness has ordered his unit to join the center. Max is ecstatic, seeing it as a direct order and a great honor, and immediately prepares to gather everyone. A younger soldier agrees, but Verna cautions that it is nothing to be happy about. He reminds them that the battle is not over yet. Just then, a soldier announces the arrival of the daughter of the Forrest family. Verna is shocked to see Miss Helmine approaching their camp. Helmine apologizes for her rudeness and says she wants to speak with Lord Verna. He tells her about the Crown Prince's orders to move to the center and explains that the retreat was a trap. Helmine is shocked but quickly accepts it as truth coming from him. She states that this new information gives her even more reason for being there, but Verna asks her to wait. Before she can continue, Helmine stops and apologizes for her earlier rudeness. She expresses her gratitude for his help. She then bows deeply, admitting that without his squad's intervention, she would not have survived. Verna is taken aback by her formal thanks. Helmine continues, stating that if the battle continues, she would like his advice on the tactics for the left wing's aristocrat unit. Faced with her earnest plea and the undeniable atmosphere she's created, Verna feels he has no choice but to agree. Later, at the center of the stronghold, Verna's unit assembles. Verna sighs from exhaustion while a soldier tells him to rest until further orders arrive. Max proudly remarks that so many people, not just the Forrest family, were asking for his advice on the move. He adds that he is very proud, noting that it seemed Miss Helmine was asking for herself, not just on behalf of her family. The soldiers praise Verna's humility and tactical genius, though he tries to downplay it. A royal knight arrives to deliver the Crown Prince's orders. Verna thinks to himself that his knowledge is just from a past life, and he doesn't know how to react to the compliments. The knight announces the new orders. Verna van Seifert is granted authority to lead the troops and several aristocrat units on the right wing. Verna humbly accepts the order, internally shocked that he has been made commander of multiple aristocrat units. His men erupt in congratulations, amazed at his promotion. Verna wonders what the Crown Prince is thinking, as he is still just an inexperienced student. His men notice his apprehension and try to reassure him, saying it's all right to be nervous. Verna reflects that his actions were necessary in a situation where everyone else thought the monsters were retreating. One soldier points out that Verna was the only one who calmly observed the situation and responded correctly. Another agrees, telling him not to worry and just keep doing what he's always done. The Seifert family unit pledges to do their best to support his orders. Verna flatly denies being nervous. He thinks to himself that his soldiers and Miss Helmine are thinking far too highly of him. He admits to himself that he only knew what to do because he knew the ending, and his tactical knowledge is purely theoretical. To be honest, he feels burdened by the responsibility. He dismisses his men, thanking them for their support. He resolves to push through his exhaustion, knowing he has to be patient and survive until Mazel defeats the demons. With a faint smile, Verna steels himself to endure a little longer. His first task is to organize his new units, hoping the war ends as soon as possible. The scene shifts to the hero, Mazel, engaged in a fierce battle. Mr. Rugence praises Mazel, surprised that a student could be so capable. The party is glad for the potions they brought, though they used more than they expected. When asked why he brought so many, Mazel explains that his friend, Verna, told him to. He smiles, calling Verna a very smart person who always helps him when he's in need. Mazel recalls being nervous about the expedition, but Verna reassured him, telling him to just be himself. One of his companions asks if this friend is also in the stampede battle. Mazel confirms that Verna is an aristocrat in the left wing, noting how friendly he is despite his status. A female companion expresses worry, noting that the main unit seems to be having a hard time. Despite her concern, Mazel is sure Verna is doing all right. Another party member praises Verna's preparedness, spearmanship, and calm, forward-thinking nature. Resolved, Mazel declares that for his friend's sake, they must find the enemy general quickly. As he vows to do his best, his companion suddenly shouts for everyone to get down as an attack comes their way. The party reels from the sudden attack. Regents remarks that it looks like they've hit the jackpot. Before them, a new enemy appears. The creature greets them formally. A magnificent, winged creature emerges from the darkness, identifying them simply as human. Though the enemy's retreat initially felt like a victory, Verna knew it was a trap designed to wipe out the knights. Thanks to the Crown Prince heeding his advice, he avoided disaster. Now, anticipating an all-out war, Verna assesses the situation. A soldier reports that units under Verna's command are moving on the Crown Prince's orders, and his tactics have been accepted. The soldier continues, stating that other units have retreated from the danger zone, with the injured heading for the capital under Sir Lewin's watch. Verna internally notes the name Lewin, identifying him as the king's grandson. The remaining forces are currently reorganizing to support the Crown Prince's close aides. Max cheerfully tells Verna that he saved them from a beating, but the real trouble is just starting. Verna considers that since the enemy's trap failed, their next move will likely be an all-out war. While the main unit prepares to withdraw quickly, Verna notices a problem. The Crown Prince doesn't seem to be withdrawing from the stronghold, an admirable but dangerous decision. A soldier approaches to give his report to Verna. He informs Verna that Lord Rhinish, Lord Degenkolb, and Sir Gutski's units have all completed their deployments. Verna is internally stunned by the commanders he's been assigned. He now commands Rhinish, the formidable Degenkolb, and the mercenary Oliver Getske. Verna panics internally, wondering what the Crown Prince was thinking by assigning these important people to an inexperienced student. Max reminds Verna of his station as a member of the House of Seifert, personally appointed by the Crown Prince to be their commander. Verna considers that 2 of the 3 commanders are from aristocratic families, though they lack titles of their own. He reasons that his own family's status is higher, so there shouldn't be an issue with them calling him Lord for now. Despite this, he remains apprehensive about something he has heard. Rhinish praises Verna, noting it was amazing how he calmly watched the enemy's movements despite being the first to engage. Verna replies that his caution paid off, while thinking to himself that Rhinish is clearly older and more experienced. Rhinish calls him humble. Verna senses that on an emotional level, it wouldn't be strange for them to find the situation uninteresting. Rhinish adds that it's an order from the Crown Prince, so he must obey, regardless of his own feelings or the prince's intentions. Verna worries internally that it would be tiresome if someone tried to outsmart him on the battlefield. Degenkolb tells him that she heard stories from those who received his war advice and that they were all in admiration. Because of this, she is delighted to fight under his command and turns to Getske for his opinion. Getske agrees, adding that Verna has excellent judgment while fighting on the front lines. Degenkolb declares that as a mercenary, she'll follow orders, and gets Rhinish to agree they have the same intentions. Verna is relieved that the high tension is being managed, though he finds Getske's status as a temporary commander of mercenaries confusing. Despite his doubts about the other 2, Verna decides to accept their cooperation and thanks them. Rhinish states he will also do his best to meet the Crown Prince's expectations. Rhinish announces he will now check on the tactics and overall battle situation. He immediately begins shouting orders to the troops. He directs the forced family squad to collect the shields and organize them efficiently. In the command tent, the Crown Prince and his staff decide to check the enemy's movement as a whole. A commander reports that according to the prince, the enemy's numbers have multiplied, but they seem to be in control, likely having turned back when the knights didn't enter the forest. The commander notes that the intelligent and emotional goblins who entered the forest had a strange form. Their own forces have increased slightly, but more importantly, so have the number of countermeasures they can take. It seems the enemy was frightened by the attack from the magic units. Given the sheer number of enemies, the commander was instructed to fight in a way that would lower their morale as much as possible. He explains the current tactic. The first and second knight orders are engaging the enemy. As the battle continues, the enemy will be gradually split to the left and right. When no one is in front of the enemy, the main unit and both wings will launch a counterattack. The goal is to disrupt the enemy's movement while their own forces conduct a fighting retreat. This, the commander concludes, is the scenario. Mine questions if there's a possibility the monsters might follow them back to the royal capital. The commander agrees that the situation is abnormal, but a war of attrition would be a failure of their own preparations. The commander tells his brother they have no choice but to act, considering their army's fighting capabilities. Tyrone agrees with the prince's tactics, but is hesitant to rely on a strategy from a young man like Verna. He argues that it's an uncharacteristic strategy for a knight, prompting a rebuke from his brother. Tyrone counters that he has already spoken to Marquis Norpoth, the left-wing commander, and received his approval. The commander considers this, recalling that Mine had told him Lord Verna's tactics were innovative. The commander orders Mine to go directly and assist Marquis Norpoth. Tyrone questions whether the Marquis would agree if he knew all the details of the plan. The commander acknowledges Tyrone's feelings but insists Verna's tactics, though unusual for a knight, are the most rational at the moment. Tyrone argues that as a noble, the Marquis has to consider the loss of personnel, including slave soldiers. The commander understands that, but has other factors to consider. The commander reasons that while they defeated a leader, the large number of mobs suggests a true mastermind is still at large. He believes it's highly likely someone is still pulling the strings from behind the scenes. The situation is abnormal, and he questions if an expedition team with incomplete equipment can handle it. Another soldier realizes that if something happens, it will be their turn to deal with the mobs. The commander concedes that while not ideal, it is the situation they are in. Verna watches intently, noting that the knights have finally started to move. With the main force engaged, he decides it's time for his unit to advance. With a resounding cry to attack, the knights charge into the fray, clashing violently with the monstrous horde. Verna assesses the situation and feels things are looking good. His basic fighting method is the same, and he's placed the Count family's knights under a new captain as a precaution. However, the number of people under his command has increased to 200, a number he's never led before, even in his past life. To manage the larger force, he added more squadrons and gave instructions to each captain, feeling he can handle it. He shouts the order for his troops to fall back. A mage shouts the command to fire, unleashing a blast of flame. An observer notes that the attack is working very well. Verna internally reflects on how strange magic is, disappearing as soon as it takes effect. His soldiers credit the enemy's dismay to his command, but Verna deflects, saying it's due to the Crown Prince's instructions. He thinks to himself that he wouldn't be so humble if they knew he was just following the game's scenario. A nearby soldier remarks that he thinks His Highness is amazing for handling so much in a short time. The knight introduces himself as Wachtel, a member of the Second Knight Order. Verna replies, stating his own name, Verna van Siefert. Wachtel stares at him silently, prompting Verna to ask if something is wrong. Wachtel explains that he wants to consult with Verna about the future movements of the right wing. Verna asks about their instructions from the main unit. Wachtel says they are to cooperate with the right wing to drive back the enemy. Verna asks about the situation in the Second Knight Order, and Wachtel reports that while there is some damage, it is not a problem. Verna explains that to protect the Crown Prince, he wants the main force to return to the understaffed headquarters, but it's dangerous. Verna explains that the First and Second Knight Orders are currently divided on opposite sides of the main unit. Wachtel stammers as Verna instructs him to take his unit to the right wing to defend the main unit's flank. Verna declares that he will personally head to the center to support the Crown Prince. Verna silently worries about the state of the Count family's knights. Wachtel turns to him with an intimidating glare, asking if he's okay with the fatigue. Verna is shocked by his scary face and wonders why he seems so angry. He imagines Wachtel berating him for leaving his knights behind during a crisis, reminding him of a knight's duty to protect the Crown Prince. Verna explains that he doesn't understand the left-wing's situation, but if they are struggling, it would be difficult for them to move. He points out that their unit, on the right side of the main force, is the one that can move most smoothly without confusion. Verna admits that even he doesn't want to undertake such a dangerous task, but if the Crown Prince dies, the entire army will be overrun by monsters. Wachtel expresses his doubt, saying he doesn't think any unit has the capacity to perform such a maneuver. Verna responds with conviction, stating that if no one else can, then those who are able must be the ones to do it. Verna prepares himself, thinking that in the worst case, he will have to force them to carry out his order. Suddenly, Wachtel bows deeply, thanking Lord Siefert for his decision, leaving Verna stunned. Wachtel declares that they will definitely maintain the right wing. Verna is confused, wondering why he is bowing and if he hadn't made him angry. Wachtel praises Verna as a splendid person, saying he feels he's become a firmer knight. Verna is deeply moved by the unexpected praise. Suddenly, someone calls out his name. He sees his adjutant, Max, running towards him and wonders if something has happened. Max is covered in blood, which Verna finds scary. Max apologizes, but Verna tells him he arrived at just the right time. Max reports that the Seifert unit is to support the center of the main unit. Verna realizes their role is to be the shield of the Crown Prince. Max adds that he was surprised when the knights thanked him, realizing they were impressed by Verna's loyalty as well as his expertise. With a flash of insight, Verna understands why the knights had been so moved. Verna understands now. Everyone mistook his plan as a willingness to be a self-sacrificing shield, which is why things felt off. Max, oblivious to Verna's inner turmoil, remarks on how much he has grown and misses his desperate training days. Max passionately declares that they must fulfill their role, and Verna reluctantly agrees to do their best. Verna feels the urge to correct the misunderstanding, but knows that now is not the time to think about that. Verna calls out to Max, who responds with a determined yes. He gives the order to push forward and break through the enemy's front. Their ultimate objective is to get in front of the main unit and support the Crown Prince. The scene shifts to Mazel's expedition, where they face a formidable winged demon whose limbs regenerate instantly, much to the shock of his companions. A companion asks if Mazel is exhausted, but he insists he's fine. Mr. Rugence observes that even hitting the main body is useless, as it regenerates immediately. Mazel tells his worried companion not to make a gloomy face and that he can handle it himself. She is impressed by his confidence. Another companion teases him for trying to be cool, but Mazel is unfazed. He mentions that thanks to a friend, he has plenty of recovery medicine. Mazel continues to fight with everything he has. He knows everyone is getting tired, but thanks to the potions, they can keep going. He feels the pressure to somehow break through the stalemate. He laments that he is not as smart as Verna. Amidst the chaos, Mazel tells himself not to panic and to just be himself. He reminds himself that as an ordinary person, his strength lies in desperately watching and thinking. He remembers Verna telling him that he has a good memory and should be better at this than him. The memory spurs him on. He has to look hard. And he has to think harder. A sudden realization dawns on him. Mazel calls out to Mr. Rugence and everyone in his party. With a confident smile, he declares, "I've got an idea." Degenkolb is stunned to hear that Lord Verna is moving to personally aid His Highness. A nearby soldier confirms that Verna himself requested the transfer, explaining that the plan is to crush the enemy's front line and position themselves before the main unit. Sir Barky notices Degenkolb's silence as she processes the information. Degenkolb collects herself and apologizes to Sir Barky. She remarks that Verna may become a key figure for the country in the near future. Sir Barky agrees, adding that perhaps the country will prosper because of it. Degenkolb quietly accepts this, her gaze fixed on a banner. Rianish speaks with another knight, sarcastically praising Verna's exploits and his offer to act as a shield for His Highness. The other knight expresses concern, noting that it's a bad idea for the distant second knight orders to move to the front in this situation. Rianish simply remarks on how wonderful he must have been as a student at Verna's age. Getske interjects, pointing out that since they are already at the front lines, there's no need for Rianish's group to put themselves in danger. Rianish claims the great honor of protecting His Highness, while the female knight listens silently. Getske expresses his gratitude for Rianish's words. Rianish concludes his speech, stating that he had the opportunity to wield his sword near His Highness and expressing his immense gratitude, even to Lord Verna. Meanwhile, Verna is in the thick of the fighting, pushing himself to the limit. He reflects on the overwhelming number of enemies. He realizes that even if they defeat them, more will just keep appearing. A soldier yells that Verna's message has been sent to all units, and Verna acknowledges the report. Verna shouts commands to his troops, directing their movements with precision. They continue their relentless push forward. Having broken through the monster ranks, Verna gives the order to contact the main unit and begin their retreat. The army falls back amidst the chaos. Verna coughs, noting to himself that his voice has grown raspy from shouting orders. Verna steels himself, reviewing the plan. They will defend their position in front of the Crown Prince's main unit. With the second knight orders joining them, the right wing should hold. His only hope is that the left wing, commanded by the Count Forst family, doesn't collapse while he's engaged in the center. The soldiers of the Forst family form a disciplined shield wall. Their commander gives the order to advance. With grim determination, the troops push forward in unison, their shields locked together. Their objective is clear, to break through the enemy line. From his command post, Marquis Norpoth watches the maneuver, impressed. He comments on the splendid and understandable tactic, attributing it to the renowned Count Forst family. Marquis Norpoth, the commander-in-chief of the left wing, remarks that there is only one lineage famous for such military honor. However, his aide corrects him, clarifying that the tactic was a suggestion from Lord Verna of the Count of Seifert. The Marquis is incredulous, asking if she is certain it was that son, but his aide confirms it. In a flashback, the Crown Prince recalls consulting with Verna, who advised him on this very tactic. The Crown Prince explains Verna's strategy. Build a shield wall to halt the enemy and attack through the gaps, with the bravest soldiers holding the shields. The final step is to use the enemy's own corpses to cover their withdrawal. In the present, Marquis Norpoth listens in thoughtful silence. Marquis Norpoth concedes that Lord Verna is better than he thought, and his aide agrees he is excellent. The Marquis decides he must report this to His Highness. At the center of the main unit, the Crown Prince's Imperial Guard commander orders them not to break formation and to push the enemy back. A soldier announces the arrival of the Count Seifert family unit. The soldiers let out a cheer as they see the reinforcements. With their relief secured, the commander gives the order to retreat. As the Imperial Guard falls back, Verna takes the lead, urging his own troops forward to fill the gap. Verna's soldiers cheer, relieved that the plan is working. The Imperial Guard commander tells his men that once they've had a breather, they will reinforce the area around His Highness. As Verna's unit charges past, the Imperial Guard soldiers watch them go. One asks which one is Lord Verna, and another points out the thin spearman. One of the guards notes that he heard Verna is still a student. Another adds that he's from a civilian family, speculating that this is why His Highness relies on him so much and that Verna is destined for a future of insane work. Verna is breathless from the fight. He takes a quick potion. A subordinate reports that all units are in position, and Verna acknowledges. Verna tells Max that he is stepping back from the front to focus on giving instructions. Verna entrusts the front lines to Max. Max confidently accepts the responsibility. Verna watches Max clear a path with spirited cries. He reflects on the heavy casualties, realizing that without potions they would all have fallen by now. Now focused on retreating, Verna feels the immense difficulty of reorganizing the chain of command while fighting. He knows he must give instructions, but finds it incredibly hard. With the Imperial Guard behind them, he feels the immense pressure that he cannot afford to fail. Verna admits to himself that if it weren't for the Crown Prince, he would want to run away. But seeing his soldiers fighting so well gives him strength. He notes that the battle line has stabilized. He entrusts a message to a subordinate. Verna explains that it is a signal for the sling unit. The sling unit locates their special ammunition, a cache of clay pots. With a grimly determined smile, Verna declares that it's time to use them. Following the meeting with the Second Night Orders, Verna's unit has moved to the front of the Crown Prince's formation, shouting for his men to push forward. Having stabilized the battle line, Verna grimly decides it is time to deploy their special weapon. A soldier relays the signal from the sling unit to the hunter unit. Verna shouts the instructions for the advance, ordering the other units to retreat after pushing the monsters back, preparing for the pursuit. A soldier in the sling unit prepares to launch a clay pot. With the monsters in their sights, the commander gives the order to fire. A volley of pots arcs through the air towards the enemy ranks. The pots shatter among the goblins, unleashing a wave of fire that engulfs them. The monsters reel back from the sudden fiery assault. Watching the plan take effect, Verna notes its success. He reflects that the weapon is similar to a Molotov cocktail, using a pot filled with perfumed oil. Unlike magic that dissipates, the oil will continue to burn normally once ignited. The burning monsters roll around desperately trying to extinguish the flames. Their frantic movements create an obstacle that hinders the enemy's advance. Seizing the opportunity, Verna rallies his men, shouting for them to push forward. The chaos caused by the flames creates a gap between the enemy's first and second battle formations. Verna realizes that if they can defeat the monsters directly in front of them, an opportunity will open up. With the enemy line broken, the order is given to fall back. This will allow them to buy enough time to retreat easily before facing the next enemy. Max shouts in relief that the plan worked perfectly. Verna agrees and tells him to continue the attack. Internally, he laments that he would push through like this if only they had more pots. The perfumed oil, after all, is sold at a very high price. He was surprised to find such valuable essential oils available, but being near the capital allowed him to procure a reasonable amount quickly. Verna silently thanks his father, a minister of right. He used his father's name to buy the oil, knowing he'll be scolded later but figuring it's better than dying. The order is given for the second volley. Verna steels himself, wondering how much longer he can hold on. Elsewhere, Rujens asks Mazel if he has a plan, and Mazel confirms he does. Mazel points out the monster on the left. He explains that after being damaged, that specific part will recover first. The recovery speed of the other parts, he notes, is slightly slower. Anna questions if the difference is significant, and Mazel admits it's only by a little. Rujens had assumed the central demon was the main body since it was being protected. Mazel confesses he doesn't know which is the real one, but reasons that focusing on the left part is their best bet. They deduce that if Mazel pretends to attack the center, the monsters will attack him from both sides. Mazel explains that afterward, Rujens and Anna must prepare their stance. He tells them to hit the left monster with everything they've got. Rujens declares he can handle the speed required for such a maneuver. Mazel adds that if his theory is correct, attacking the left part should distract the central enemy, giving him a chance to defeat it. Rujens tells Rick to have a potion ready just in case. With the plan set, they agree to proceed. Rujens warns Mazel to be careful. He advises him that if things get dangerous, he should focus on protecting himself. Mazel gives a confident smile and agrees. Rujens asks Anna if she's ready, and she confirms, eager to hit the monster with all their might. Rujens yells for Mazel to go. Mazel charges forward in response. The female demon watches, remarking with boredom that she remembers this foolish tactic. Mazel's feint works, and the central monster is struck. The demon watches with a calm, knowing expression. The demon glares at Mazel, angered by his insolence. Mazel is thrown back by a powerful counterattack. With the plan successful, Rujens shouts in triumph. As the monster dissolves, Mazel excitedly mistakes its remains for a treasure chest. The defeated demon begins to laugh, and Mazel asks what's so funny. She reveals she is looking forward to seeing his despair, telling him that right now, her children are destroying the knights. The demon tells him he will return to a sea of corpses. Mazel grabs her in shock, demanding to know what she said. She merely laughs at his expression, calling it a worthy opening for that person's awakening. The demon's taunting laughter echoes in his mind. His companions celebrate their victory, marveling at the size of the treasure chest. Rujens remarks that it looks promising. But Mazel is haunted by the demon's final words about the knights being destroyed. A look of horror dawns on his face as the implication sets in, and he yells that they have to go back quickly. Back on the main battlefield, Verna's forces are locked in a desperate struggle. A soldier calls out to Verna. He reports that they are running out of flame pots. Verna orders the luggage carriers and hunter unit to begin their withdrawal to the Tieserfurt mansion. He grimaces, realizing the enemy's pressure hasn't lessened at all. Verna reflects on the difficulty of withdrawing when they don't know where the monsters are coming from. If only the knights weren't behind him, his options would be greater. He could throw flame pots more freely, and wishes he could just outrun the monsters, but his duty holds him in place. The relentless horde of monsters continues to press forward, a seemingly endless tide of claws and teeth. With a final, desperate roar, Verna gives the order for one last push to drive the enemy back. The soldiers are hesitant. Max rallies them, shouting that Verna must have a plan, and that the enemy is frightened, urging them to continue the charge. The soldiers respond with a powerful cheer, surging forward. Watching from afar, the Crown Prince lets out a quiet sound of acknowledgement. The Crown Prince asks if something is wrong, and an aide reports that reinforcements have arrived thanks to his grandson. His mustached aide agrees that this is reassuring, as the enemy should now be calmed and exhausted. He tells his subordinate to report any changes immediately. The aide then asks the Crown Prince where he is heading. The mustached aide says he is going for a little diversion. The Crown Prince then turns to his other aide with a sly smile, asking if she would like to join him. Max grits his teeth, putting all his strength into every swing of his blade. The tide of battle turns as the knights overwhelm their monstrous opponents. A soldier cries out that they have won. The sentiment echoes as the fighting subsides. Amidst the fallen, Verna stands motionless. His eyes are wide with shock and confusion. A soldier calls out to him, excitedly saying they've won, but his voice trails off into a question. The soldiers around him celebrate their victory, congratulating each other, but Verna realizes something is terribly wrong. He thinks to himself that he got too excited and messed up. His men look on in confusion as his demeanor changes. Verna collapses into Max's arms as the soldiers cry out his name in alarm. With his last bit of strength, he orders them to bring a potion quickly. As his consciousness fades, Verna's only thought is that he is still alive. At a somber gathering, The air is thick with whispers about a recently deceased young man, with some recalling him as an excellent person. The circumstances of his death, protecting his younger brother, are debated, with some callously suggesting it was due to a lack of training, while others focus on the now secure succession. A young Verna, the brother in question, listens to it all with a heavy heart, quietly accepting their words. He stands silently, absorbing the callous remarks of the crowd around him. Verna is internally appalled that they could speak so freely at such a time, as the gossip turns to marriage prospects and the deceased's former engagement. An attendant quietly guides him away from the crowd. As he leaves, he overhears others speculating about him, the new successor, and his unknown skills. The heartless chatter fills him with a deep sense of revulsion. He is led out into the estate grounds, away from the gossiping nobles. He spots his late brother's fiancée, laughing with her friends, expressing relief at no longer having to marry a man from a civilian family. The sight shocks Verna, who wonders if such cruelty is normal in this world, while another observer agrees her behavior is simply too much. To Verna, these people seem less like humans and more like monsters. The thought triggers a jarring flashback to a horrific battle. The violent memory overwhelms him with shock. Soldiers shout commands to keep pushing forward and not to hesitate amidst the chaos. Verna jolts awake with a gasp, sweating and disoriented. His eyes are wide with panic as he realizes it was all a dream. He sits up in bed, realizing it's been a while since he last dreamt of his brother's funeral. The memory of his brother's ex-fiancée at the event makes him feel sick, and he wonders if his mind altered the memory. His thoughts shift to the recent stampede battle he took part in. Suddenly, his mother's voice cuts through his thoughts, announcing that he is awakened. As Verna tries to move, he's hit with a wave of muscle pain. His mother chides him for pushing himself too hard, explaining that he's been unconscious for a whole day and that everyone was worried. Verna struggles to speak. He manages to apologize, his voice hoarse. His mother tells him they will treat his throat first. She calls for Norbert to bring a potion, since Verna needs his voice to give commands. The butler promptly presents the potion to him. Verna drinks the potion. He feels guilty for making his mother and Norbert worry. As he drinks, he thinks how the experience reminds him of when he was first reincarnated and asks about the war. His mother informs him of their victory. Verna expresses his relief, though he finds her stern expression scary. He realizes the battle wasn't a hallucination. His mother then tells him that once he can speak properly, he will report everything to his father. Verna agrees to his mother's request. Later, Verna faces his father, who acknowledges he has much to say. However, his father states he can't blame Verna for something the royal family has praised him for. He then reveals that a messenger from the royal family came to visit Verna personally, leaving his son stunned. His father continues, handing him a list of other notable families who came to visit. He also informs Verna that in 5 days, he will receive an award from the emperor himself. His father sternly tells him to remember this. Verna bows his head and deeply apologizes for the trouble he's caused. Verna's father softens slightly, telling him that his quick wits saved many people and that Max and the others spoke of him constantly. He praises Verna, saying he did well. He asks if Verna is feeling better, and Verna confirms he is. His father then instructs him to submit a report on the perfumed oil later. He also tells him he can rest from school until the upcoming ceremony. With the conversation concluded, Verna leaves his father's study. Norbert meets him outside, expressing his gladness that the master is happy, but Verna quietly voices his doubts. As they walk, Norbert remembers something. He tells Verna that he has a document for him to send. Verna reads the document, a list of casualties, learning that 2 viscounts have died and a baron is seriously injured. He reflects on the many nobles who died and the student casualties from the Knight Department, considering the heavy burden this places on commoner families. He tells Norbert that his classmates died in the war, men he didn't even know personally. Verna instructs Norbert to write letters of condolence under his name and send a representative to the funerals. He also proposes a plan to his father to support the siblings of the deceased who wish to enter the academy. Norbert agrees to prepare the proposal. Alone, he questions if he is even human. He is disturbed by his own calm demeanor in the face of his classmates' deaths. He reasons that if Max or his other close companions had been seriously injured or killed, he wouldn't be so calm, wondering if his detachment stems from treating this world like a game. If this world is a game, he worries about the unexpected changes to the scenario. He begins to consider what negative influence his actions might have on the hero's departure. Verna reflects on the recent stampede battle, trusting the Crown Prince's judgment based on that experience. As someone responsible for protecting the royal capital, he found it reassuring to have a strong ruler and knights. However, he's uncertain if events will continue to follow the game's script, knowing the hero's next major event is supposed to be at the Veliza fortress. For now, Verna decides to focus on strengthening the capital's defenses by improving equipment and tactics. He recalls how he barely managed to fend off the last monster attack, which consisted of only small fries, despite their hasty preparations. Verna knows that to fight an intelligent and intense enemy, they will need to train their warfare collectively. But he foresees a problem. He feels his position is precarious. As the untitled son of a count from a civilian family, he's a civil officer in a world of military men. He thinks it would be ideal if he could ask Max and the other veteran knights to properly train the others, but rumors of the Demon King's resurrection haven't spread yet. With their recent victory against the monster stampede, creating a new sense of emergency will be difficult. In a world that honors individual bravery, he's sure many will oppose his new, group-focused fighting style. Verna's first priority is to make everyone understand the situation and recognize the necessity of group tactics. He muses that perhaps converting the threat of the Demon King's resurrection into data will help them understand the urgency. His thoughts are interrupted by a man calling his name Mr. Verna. The man introduces himself as Frenson, assigned to represent Verna on this occasion. Verna thanks him and hands him a pouch, instructing him to use its contents to help anyone who seems to be struggling, and to invoice him if more is needed. Frenson understands. Verna knows that after dealing with the stampede's aftermath, he must come up with their next move. Comprehensively understanding the damage, honoring the achievers, and providing for funerals and medical treatments will take a while. Looking out at the rain, he feels a small sense of relief that he doesn't have to attend school right now. A few days later, the scene is set. In a garden, a tense confrontation erupts. Verna faces his opponent with a determined look. His friend lunges forward, ready to strike. Verna is thrown off balance by the sudden attack. He swiftly counters, tripping his friend. Verna quickly takes control, pinning his friend to the ground. Pinned to the ground, Verna wryly remarks that his friend is as merciless as ever, questioning if he remembers being asked for a casual competition. His friend replies that he can't possibly hold back against the hero of the stampede battle, prompting Verna to plead for him to stop. Their spar is interrupted by a maid approaching with refreshments. Verna's friend excitedly tells him that he was amazing, and that rumors are already circulating around the school. He praises Verna's ability to see through enemy movements and traps, and to counterattack as soon as their defense fell. The maid interjects, saying she heard Mr. Hubertus praised Verna's wonderful insight and strategies. Verna is taken aback by the name, but the maid clarifies she was speaking of His Highness. Overwhelmed by the excessive credit, Verna buries his face in his hands. The friend continues, mentioning that His Highness compared Verna's unconventional fighting style to a hedgehog, finding it surprisingly effective. Verna internally recognizes this as a reference to the phalanx formation, a concept the military-minded Forced family would understand. His friend, impressed, remarks that it's just as expected from military officers. Verna can't help but feel sarcastic about the praise, but his friend quickly changes the subject, presenting him with something else. Verna thinks it's a tea party invitation, but his friend clarifies that this is different, with one letter coming from Kollwitz's younger sister. Verna's friend explains that the letters are from the families of fallen soldiers, like Baltzar's father and Willem. He says that when he attended the funerals, he was asked to express their gratitude, noting that even the aristocrats were very impressed. Verna notes that students who were neither aristocrats nor registered adventurers should have been on standby, but his friend agrees that no one could have expected what happened. Verna somberly agrees. His friend concludes that thanks to Verna, they were able to protect what was dear to them. His friend continues, acknowledging the sadness of death but pointing out that Verna's actions allowed many people to rejoice in peace and mourn properly. He sincerely tells Verna that from the bottom of his heart, he finds having someone like him very reassuring. Verna is taken aback by the heartfelt praise. The maid chimes in, calling his friend the hero who beat the demon boss, but he humbly denies it. Verna states that he doesn't know what would have happened if his friend hadn't defeated the boss and destroyed the crystal that controlled the other demons. Changing the subject, Verna asks his friend if he remembers the black gem from the battle and if he knows what it was. His friend replies that after analysis, it was deemed an unknown item. Verna is puzzled, wondering to himself if this item ever appeared in the game. His friend brushes it off, jokingly calling Verna an almighty hero and complaining about how hard his time at school was. He explains he was only able to evacuate because he told everyone he needed to deliver the letters to Verna, and the commoners cleared an escape route for him. Verna muses on the word evacuate, as his friend explains that as a commoner, he doesn't know how to decline an invitation from an aristocrat. He worries about what to wear and what etiquette he should follow for the victory ceremony tomorrow. Verna decides that while he may not be a good teacher, as a friend, he can't refuse to help him. He confidently states that this is his area of expertise, much to his friend's immense relief. Verna advises his friend on how to handle the invitations and what to wear, suggesting the school uniform since it's also ceremonial attire. Verna hopes the victory ceremony will proceed smoothly as planned. At the ceremony, the king calls for the next honoree, Verna van Siefert, legitimate son of Count Siefert. As Verna kneels, the king bestows upon him the title of Viscount. Verna is utterly stunned, wondering to himself how this could have possibly happened. A few days after the stampede battle, a victory ceremony is held at the royal palace. Verna initially thought things were proceeding smoothly, but he would soon be proven wrong. From his throne, the king begins by calling forward the most distinguished person in the war. The first to be honored is Hubertus Nallas Weiss Weinzierl, who humbly accepts the king's praise. He is followed by the second most distinguished person, Ingo Fatih Siefert. The king commends Count Siefert's unit, and the count offers his thanks. The king then continues, bestowing the title of Viscount upon Verna. Verna is completely shocked, though he forces himself to give a gracious acceptance. He can feel the intense, burning stares of the other nobles fixed upon him. Verna muses on the strange mix of medieval and modern elements in this world, wondering if it's a consequence of it being a game. His thoughts are interrupted as the ceremony continues. Verna dismisses his thoughts as unimportant. The announcer calls forward the person with the third highest contribution, Mazel Harding. Verna watches Mazel approach the throne. He thinks to himself that Mazel was supposed to be in first place, but decides to keep it quiet. He admires his friend's noble bearing, thinking he looks like a work of art, just as expected of the protagonist. Verna recalls Mazel mentioning he wanted to show his cool side to his family, but hadn't invited them. He understands that the distance to their home in Aliyah village would make it impossible to attend anyway. Still, he feels it's a shame, as he knows they have a good relationship. He wonders if a game item like flying shoes exists here, and makes a mental note to investigate why they aren't available. Mazel flawlessly accepts his honor, making Verna proud. The king then calls forward the fourth-place contributor, Marquis Danilo Stipe Norpoth. Verna decides he can finally relax until the banquet ends. Verna navigates the crowded banquet hall. Mazel approaches him, congratulating him on his good work. Mazel tells him that this is just the beginning. Verna is miserable, his stomach aching from the constant judgmental stares of the other nobles. Mazel tries to be encouraging, pointing out the benefits of Verna's new title. Verna deflects, saying that's not what he meant. He quotes the principle that with great power comes great responsibility. Verna internally groans at the thought of all the new duties he'll have as a noble and successor. Mazel seems to agree, suggesting that while Verna's new life will be busy, it's a good thing. Internally, Verna panics, viewing the situation as the worst possible outcome. His new duties will force him to spend more time in the royal capital, a likely target for attack. Furthermore, increased involvement in military affairs drastically raises his chances of dying. Mazel observes that Verna seems to be the only one troubled by his new peerage. Marquis Norpoth interrupts to congratulate Verna, who in turn apologizes for his previous rudeness during the battle. The Marquis accepts the apology. He reveals that the Crown Prince had already spoken to him about the matter, much to Verna's surprise. The Marquis admits he had planned to confront Verna, but the prince had warned him to be lenient. Seeing Verna's sincerity now, he realizes a confrontation is unnecessary. At the bustling victory banquet, a nobleman congratulates Count Siefert on his wonderful heir. The count accepts the praise, looking forward to his son's future achievements. Elsewhere, Verna offers his own polite thanks for the compliments he is receiving. Mazel approaches his friend, asking what all the formal pleasantries were about. Verna explains to Mazel that he went directly to His Highness to warn him about the monster's retreat being a trap. He clarifies that he was supposed to report to his direct commander, Marquis Norpoth, who would then relay the information. Mazel expresses concern, asking if that wasn't a dangerous breach of protocol. Verna confirms that it was, admitting he didn't have enough time to convince Norpoth. He elaborates that allowing rule-breaking, even for good contributions, would destroy discipline within the military. Mazel expresses his admiration, saying he wouldn't have understood the situation without Verna's explanation, and Verna credits his noble upbringing. As Mazel looks on, Verna's thoughts drift, knowing his status as a noble isn't the only reason for his insight. Their conversation is interrupted as someone calls out for Lord Verna. Marquis Norpoth approaches, commending Verna's actions as a splendid feat, though Verna deflects the praise onto the knights. The Marquis pauses, considering his words carefully. He then formally apologizes for his own impoliteness before the start of the battle. Verna quickly dismisses the need for an apology. Marquis Norpoth confesses that he had truly underestimated Verna's commanding ability. Verna realizes the Marquis simply wants to apologize to him personally. He understands this is a way for the Marquis to protect his own honor, as a formal apology should have been directed to Verna's father. Verna silently laments how tiresome interactions between nobles can be. Verna formally accepts the gesture, thinking to himself that omitting the word apology is part of modern noble etiquette. However, the Marquis has another matter to discuss. He inquires about his eldest son, Lord Tyrone, who was not listed among the severely wounded and thus should be at the celebration. Verna notes the impoliteness of the question but admits to himself that he is also curious about the absence. The Marquis quickly moves on, hoping to maintain a good relationship between their lands despite any underlying tensions. Verna agrees, hoping for amicable relations, as the Marquis excuses himself and his companion. Before leaving, the Marquis's companion turns to Verna, saying she would love to speak with him about strategies in the future. Verna graciously accepts her offer. He watches them walk away into the crowd. Verna muses that judging by their attitude, they no longer look down on him as they did before. He feels a sense of relief, thinking that getting along with neighboring territories is more than enough of a victory for him. Mazel observes that Verna seems to be having a really difficult time. Verna turns to his friend and says that what he's dealing with is nothing compared to Mazel's situation, leaving him confused. A portly nobleman, Viscount Unger, eagerly pushes through the crowd to introduce his daughter to Mazel. Verna coolly intervenes, reminding the Viscount that his daughter is merely 3 years old, while Mazel tries to politely decline. Their attempt to escape is futile, as they are immediately swarmed by other hopeful nobles. Verna internally despairs at the scene, noting that people are pushing forward women of all ages, pretending it's not an issue. Verna observes that as long as Mazel is the hero of the stampede battle and has the hero skill, his commoner status doesn't matter. Even so, he feels a sense of unease about this celebration. He reflects that, according to the game's scenario, this peace was only possible because the Crown Prince and his knights, who were supposed to die, survived. Verna doesn't believe peace is inherently bad. However, he acknowledges that there have been significant deviations from the original story he knows. He finds himself hoping that the next event will unfold according to the original scenario. He is aware that if that happens, some of the people currently celebrating might die. Despite the grim thought, he doesn't believe it's wrong for him to wish for the timeline to correct itself. Mazel, looking completely drained, thanks Verna for the save. Verna tells him not to worry about it and offers to treat him to lunch. Verna remarks on how popular Mazel is, even back at the academy. Verna knows that this is just the beginning of the changes. He thinks that, to be honest, he would be in trouble if the original event hadn't happened as it did. Because of the changes, monster subjugations have increased, and he hopes Mazel will have a very hard time dealing with it all. He reflects that his focus on his own survival for the past 10 years has made him egoistic, but he doesn't think that's necessarily a bad thing. A young woman with long, light hair approaches the pair, apologizing for disturbing their conversation. As Verna bows in response, the woman tells Viscount Seifert that there is no need for such courtesy. She introduces herself as Laura Louise Weinzierl. Verna is floored, thinking to himself that she can't be serious. He frantically wonders why the story's heroine is appearing now, far earlier than she was supposed to. As Verna recognizes the heroine, Princess Laura, she politely asks if she might have a moment with him and Mazel. Princess Laura leads Verna and a companion through the palace, flanked by armored guards. With a knowing smile, she gestures for them to proceed into the chamber ahead. They step out into a lush, overgrown garden courtyard. As they walk, Mazel quietly comments to Verna on the princess's beauty. Mazel muses that good looks must be a requirement for royalty, and Verna agrees. Internally, Verna is unsettled, realizing they are being led deep into the castle. He recognizes this area as a place that, according to the game, should only be accessible after the capital has been half destroyed. A hooded figure silently gestures for them to continue forward. They arrive at a magnificent, domed pavilion. Mazel can't help but voice his awe at the splendor of the royal palace. Verna reflects on the sheer luxury of the place, a world completely different from his own, with a sense of beauty that even he can appreciate despite his lack of aesthetic sense. As they approach, a man in a striking white uniform welcomes them, and an attendant announces their arrival. Verna and Mazel are stunned into silence, with Verna wondering why they are here. The man apologizes for the trouble of summoning them. Verna realizes with a start that he is in the presence of the Crown Prince. The four of them stand together: the Crown Prince, Princess Laura, Mazel, and Verna. Verna mentally labels everyone, seeing himself as a mob character among the protagonist, heroine, and Crown Prince. He feels an overwhelming sense that he should not be there. Verna thinks that from an outside perspective, it is Mazel the commoner who is out of place. However, he observes that Mazel appears perfectly relaxed, just as a protagonist should. The Crown Prince gets straight to the point, thanking them both personally for their help during the stampede battle. Mazel deflects the praise, but Verna humbly adds that their success was due to everyone's combined efforts. Verna finds the sight of royalty bowing to him unsettling and decides to change the subject. Princess Laura assures him that he can speak her name freely, without fear of being scolded. Though Verna hesitates, the princess insists that she does not mind. After a nod from the Crown Prince, Verna accepts the informal arrangement. He thinks to himself that he never expected to find Princess Laura at the royal palace. Verna says he originally thought the princess was at the great temple of Finnoy, claiming he heard it from his father. The Crown Prince remarks that it isn't unusual for the minister to know such things. Verna keeps his true source of information, the game, to himself. He recalls the original plot, where the temple's attack was the catalyst for Mazel and Laura's first meeting, a key event that has now changed. Verna wonders if this early acquaintance between Mazel and Laura is a good or bad thing. The Crown Prince explains that Laura received an oracle and came back to report it. The oracle's message is dire: the Demon King has revived. Mazel is shocked by the news, asking if it's true. The Crown Prince confirms the oracle's validity. Mazel questions if such confidential information should be shared, but the Crown Prince notes they lack definite proof of the revival. Verna quietly agrees that this is just the way things are. The prince explains that while ruins of a kingdom destroyed by the Demon King exist, most people now consider him a mere fairy tale. Princess Laura elaborates, stating that there are different levels of oracles, which are difficult to explain to those who cannot receive them. Laura explains that this particular oracle was of the highest level, compelling her to report it to His Majesty personally. The Crown Prince adds that the king likely sensed the truth in it due to the recent battle. While this explains the urgency, Verna still doesn't understand why he and Mazel were summoned. Laura provides the answer. The oracle also foretold that the hero will play a vital role in the future. Looking at Mazel, Laura states this is why she hoped to meet him. Verna finally understands the reasoning. He realizes that in this world, a hero is defined by their rare skills, not by defeating a demon king. This explains why the military immediately issued a subjugation command to a first-year student like Mazel. Verna recalls that in the game, the oracle likely prompted the king to send Mazel on his journey after the stampede. He tells the prince that he understands the reasoning for calling Mazel. However, he still doesn't see his own role in this and asks why he was also summoned. The Crown Prince's reply is blunt. He wants Lord Verna to serve as a bridge and a wall for Mazel. Mazel questions the Crown Prince's strange request to be a bridge and a wall. Seifert explains that without a public announcement of the oracle, a formal reason is needed for Mazel, a commoner, to associate with the royal family. Internally, Verna blames himself for the convoluted situation. He muses that if events had followed the game's tragic path, the story would be more straightforward, and no one would question the king's interest in Mazel. The Crown Prince, with Princess Laura beside him, declares his intent to confirm the Demon King's revival. He adds that he also wishes to maintain close contact with Mazel. Verna is privately relieved that the royal family still acknowledges the hero's importance in defeating the Demon King, despite the altered circumstances. Mazel understands the plan. It would not be strange for him to be seen with Viscount Verna at the royal castle. Mazel adds that their association at the academy would also appear normal, which Seifert confirms. However, Mazel is still confused about his role as a wall. Verna explains that, just as he did before, he must protect Mazel from other nobles seeking to entangle him in their affairs. He elaborates that the royal family cannot stop other countries or nobles from trying to take Mazel for themselves. Becoming involved with other noble families would force Mazel to negotiate with them first during an emergency, and there is no guarantee they would be cooperative. The Crown Prince agrees with the explanation. He then addresses Lord Verna directly. He proposes appointing Mazel as Verna's subordinate and asks what he thinks of the idea. Verna is taken aback by the sudden offer. Without hesitation, Verna firmly refuses the proposal. The Crown Prince points out that he and Mazel are friends, and thus, equals. Verna promises to follow the royal family's commands and cooperate with Mazel. However, he states clearly that he will not alter their relationship to one of a superior and subordinate. Verna reflects on the political dangers of the game's original plot, where the hero's lover could easily be targeted. The Crown Prince suggests the subordinate relationship could be for appearances only, just like their friendship. Verna realizes the prince's offer is not a command, but a proposal to gauge his ambition and see if he intends to control the hero. Even with this understanding, Verna stands firm. He tells the prince he will still refuse. The Crown Prince acknowledges Verna's decision. Verna reflects that while a smart leader is reassuring, their intelligence can be unsettling. Seifert changes his approach, asking Verna to support Mazel's activities in the capital, a request Verna accepts. Mazel feels conflicted, wanting to refuse on Verna's behalf but recognizing the potential benefits. Verna realizes that with the royal family acknowledging his friendship with Mazel, he is committed to supporting him as a noble. The Crown Prince thanks Lord Verna, who accepts the gratitude. Verna remembers how in the game, the hero was sent off with barely enough money for proper armor, and he plans to use this opportunity to rectify that. The Crown Prince tells Mazel that he looks forward to their future collaboration. The Crown Prince smiles as he prepares to depart. He excuses himself, leaving Verna and Mazel. Verna thinks about how kind-hearted Mazel is, noting that he neglected his own training out of concern for his schoolmates. He resolves to support Mazel in every way possible, whether with equipment or social matters, determined not to be a useless friend. Princess Laura approaches to apologize for her brother's behavior, but Verna insists he didn't mind. Mazel stammers, unsure how to react, and Verna tells him not to worry. Mazel quietly agrees. Verna watches the royal siblings, thinking about their dynamic. He muses that their significant age difference makes them look more like a parent and child. Suddenly, a thought strikes him. He realizes he is witnessing the fated meeting between the game's protagonist, Mazel, and its heroine, Princess Laura. Realizing this is a chance to push the story forward, Verna decides to make a quick exit. He tells a stunned Mazel that he is leaving the rest to him. Princess Laura notes with amusement that this is the first time she has heard Mazel's panicked voice. Verna asks two nearby attendants to guide him to the restroom. As he leaves, he silently apologizes to Mazel for abandoning him. Verna's true motive is revealed. He wants to witness the developing relationship between the hero and the princess. He thinks that although it's early in the story, it's for the best that they start getting along now, and he silently wishes Mazel good luck. He feels confident it will be okay, as the princess seems both playful and friendly. Walking through the palace, he hopes that despite the deviations, the main storyline hasn't changed, though he admits this might just be wishful thinking. In the Grand Hall, Seifert worries that if things escalate, the royal capital and the palace itself could be half destroyed. He contemplates the potential for the magnificent hall to become a ruin. His gaze falls upon a knight and several other nobles, realizing they too would be in danger. One of the noblewomen suddenly addresses Seifert by name. Startled by the sudden address, he apologizes for his abruptness. The two women turn to Verna, bowing deeply to express their sincere gratitude to the Viscount. Verna is confused, stating that he does not recall doing anything to deserve their thanks. The woman explains they heard the Viscount saw through a monster's trap, saving her father and the other woman's brother, who are both knights. She insists that if it were not for him, both their relatives might have died in battle. The women reiterate how very thankful they are. They apologize for their impoliteness, explaining they simply had to express their gratitude. Verna accepts their thanks gracefully, telling them they are welcome. After the women excuse themselves, Seifert leads them away. Verna takes a moment to wash his hands. He reflects that he's truly thankful for this world's surprisingly solid water and sewage infrastructure. As someone reincarnated from modern times, he was relieved to find this world had toilets, unlike the game it's based on. He wonders if magic exists that can create something from nothing. He concludes that even if magic exists, it isn't omnipotent, and people still die. This realization is why he has fought so hard to survive. Ever since he remembered his past life as a child, he knew the outcome of the impending stampede battle. He tried his best and managed to survive the first major obstacle. Yet, he sometimes wonders if he could have done more. He questions if he held back because he saw this world as just a game and simply dumped responsibility for the students onto the hero. But now he recognizes the people here, the knight, the maids, and his fellow students are real, and he has formed genuine relationships with them. Verna admits to himself that neither he nor Mazel can handle everything alone. He considers the possibility that his actions might not have changed anything at all. Even so, he finds that believing he did his best makes him feel better than he usually does. His actions were for his own survival, so he feels bothered by the fact that he's being appreciated for them. However, if his actions to survive were useful to those around him, he feels he should consider that possibility more assertively. He knows he lacks Mazel's combat prowess, but he has knowledge of the game and influence as a noble. Therefore, he resolves that he cannot just leave everything to Mazel. Verna decides to add a new goal beyond simply surviving. He will do what he can to help. Elsewhere, Princess Laura remarks to Mazel that he and Lord Verna seem to trust each other very well. Mazel seems pleased by her observation. He apologizes in advance, but admits he is curious about something and wants to ask her a question. Princess Laura smiles, telling him she would be happy to answer if she can. He then asks why Lord Verna refused the offer to make Mazel his subordinate. Mazel thinks that if he became Verna's knight, he would be less likely to be approached by others and could easily accompany the royals to fight the Demon King. He wonders why Verna would refuse such a beneficial proposal from the prince. Princess Laura reveals it was a test. Her brother wanted to test Lord Verna's greediness. She confesses that she believes the Demon King's revival is real. Laura continues, explaining that she also believes Mazel is the only one whose power can withstand the Demon King. She points out that if Mazel became Verna's knight, Verna would gain immense power as his superior. While she doesn't believe Verna prioritizes his own interests, she knows others are not so trusting. She warns that many people, including her brother, doubt him and will try to use him for their own ends. Princess Laura explains that her brother and father believe having Mazel belong to the royal family is in the best interest of the country. She is certain that Lord Verna understood this. With a knowing look, she offers a wild guess. She thinks Lord Verna simply wanted to remain friends with Mazel, just as he said. The word friends echoes in Mazel's mind. Laura adds that she also has important friends she would not want a hierarchical relationship with. Mazel expresses his surprise that the princess feels that way. Laura playfully feigns sadness at his surprise, causing him to panic and apologize profusely. She asks if he dislikes her teasing, and he frantically insists that he does not. Princess Laura smiles, saying she is glad. Mazel laughs, clearly flustered. Observing them, Verna thinks to himself that Laura has finally warmed up to Mazel. He steps forward, excusing himself for interrupting their pleasant conversation. Princess Laura and Mazel welcome him back. Verna immediately changes the subject, mentioning he heard from the prince that the two of them got into a fight with an upperclassman. Princess Laura laughs it off, clarifying that she was the one who asked Mazel to fight. She then turns to Verna with a cheerful smile, saying she would like to hear his side of the story too. The three of them settle in to continue their conversation. A few days after the ceremony, Verna Seifert reflects that his school life is far from peaceful. He is approached by a young woman, Lady Nadia, who asks for a moment of his time, much to his internal exasperation. He laments that multiple nobles have been blatantly flirting with him. Verna internally dismisses her advances, understanding that at the academy, nobles often use teachers for backing. He feels a bit of pity for her, knowing true love is a luxury for noble daughters, and that she was likely put up to this by her parents. Though he feels some pity, he is ultimately just sick of the situation, as she asks when they can meet again. Lady Nadia asks Verna for a promise. She led him to a preparation room and locked the door behind them. Verna realizes her plan is to ensure no one will come looking for him, creating a compromising situation. Just then, the door handle jiggles, startling them both. A young man named Drexler calls out for Verna from the other side. Drexler enters, apologizing to Lady Nadia for the interruption. Verna is internally relieved, glad he took precautions. Drexler explains that Professor Leiden asked him to bring a statue to him. He struggles with the large statue, using it as a prop for his excuse. He then cheekily asks Lady Nadia if he can borrow Verna. Lady Nadia reluctantly agrees. Once they are clear, Verna thanks Drexler for saving him. Verna asks what Professor Leiden said. Drexler explains the professor took Mazel to discuss the demons and gave them permission to use his name if needed, which Drexler just did. Verna recalls that Professor Leiden is a commoner appointed by His Highness. This confirms Verna's suspicion that the prince had placed other measures within the academy besides him, and he wonders what Mazel and the professor are discussing. Verna feels relieved, confident that even if Professor Leiden is a bit rough, he will back them up. As they walk, Drexler teases Verna about becoming his patron, calling him Mr. Count of the Future, which Verna tells him to stop. Drexler comments on Verna's rapid rise in status since the Stampede battle and his conferment. Drexler suggests it might be easier to just get into a committed relationship, but Verna dismisses the idea as too troublesome at the moment. Verna internally reflects that he has no time for marriage, a troublesome custom he'd rather avoid, especially given his uncertain chances of survival. Drexler seems to understand. Verna asks what they should do with the statue, and Drexler notes that carrying it is making other students avoid them, so they should just head to the classroom. Verna lets out a resigned sigh. Later in class, Mazel sighs that he can finally relax. Verna observes that he looks tired, and Mazel agrees. Verna tells him class will be over soon. Mazel mentions he thought he would be fine once he returned to the dormitory, but implies that is no longer the case. Verna listens with understanding. Concerned that something might happen in Mazel's room, Verna makes an offer. He tells Mazel he can use his room at the dormitory and offers him the key. Mazel is surprised, but Verna points out that he likely cannot sleep peacefully either. Verna watches as Mazel accepts the key. Mazel says he will be extra careful, but will keep the key just in case, thanking him. Verna explains that unlike a commoner's room, a noble's room cannot be entered so easily, making it a safer refuge. An instructor asks Verna about his plans, mentioning their upcoming attendance at the castle. Verna replies that he is going back to his house after this because he has much to prepare. The instructor acknowledges his plan. Verna tells Mazel he wants to introduce him to someone who helped during the stampede battle. He thinks about Regent's Laser, a key adventurer from the game who should have formed a duo with the hero, but notes that things seem to be different this time around. Mazel asks how many people there will be, and Verna reassures him it is only one person he trusts. Internally, Verna reaffirms that Regent's is supposed to help eliminate the Demon King, so there is no reason to refuse his involvement. The instructor interjects that he also has something to discuss and will contact them later with a time and date. Verna tells him he is counting on it. The instructor tells them it is about time and to follow the procedure when the final bell rings, which Verna understands. As the bell tolls, the classroom window shatters and Mazel leaps out. The dramatic exit shocks the other students. Mazel winks as he plummets from the high window, leaving his classmates and teacher staring in disbelief at his reckless departure. Verna watches him go, thinking that as the hero, Mazel is now the center of attention, and only he could survive a fall from such a height. As he begins to run down the hallway himself, he wonders how many decades it has been since he last ran like this. Verna returns home to a warm welcome from his head butler and staff, who asks about his visit to the royal castle. Looking weary but pleased, Verna reports that the visit went smoothly. He explains that he likely won't need to visit the castle frequently, which means he should be home earlier the next day. Verna asks the butler to prepare some items he needs for work. He then asks about his father, and the butler informs him that he has not yet returned. Verna isn't surprised, knowing his father is busy with the aftermath of a battle and the Demon King's revival. He tells the butler he needs some advice and will write a message to be passed on later. The butler then asks Verna what his plans are for the day. The butler suggests a meal, but Verna declines. He explains that he wants to go training first and asks for his meal to be brought to his room after he bathes. The staff expresses their concern, urging him not to overexert himself. Verna reassures them he just wants to clear his head and will take it easy. The butler and staff bow in understanding. After Verna departs, the head butler reflects on his young master's unchanged demeanor despite his new status and workload. This sentiment rallies the other servants, who eagerly plan to prepare nutritious food and relaxing tea for him. The head butler smiles, and the staff resolves to watch over their young master. Out in the courtyard, Verna begins his training, gripping his spear with intense focus. While training, Verna assesses his situation, feeling that things at the royal castle are proceeding without issue. His life at the academy is also manageable. He feels secure in his physical abilities, believing he can escape any danger. He knows Mazel will soon depart to face the Demon King. He is momentarily distracted when he accidentally pierces his training dummy. His thoughts drift to the game's main characters, Laura and Regent's, finding it strange to interact with them in this reality. Since reincarnating into this world he recognizes as a game, he has fought to retain his memories. He repeatedly writes down and burns the information to prevent it from becoming a dangerous book of prophecies. This knowledge has been useful, and he expects it to remain so if the story follows the original script. Yet, he feels a sense of dissatisfaction. He reflects on all the things he has learned that were never in the game. This includes the existence of nobles. There are also towns that were never featured on the game map, and infrastructure like water supply and sewerage systems. Not to mention magic stones capable of storing magic powers. He theorizes that these details might have been omitted from the game simply due to its limited capacity. However, his thoughts turn to the black stone dropped by a demon Mazel defeated, an item he has no memory of from the game. Overwhelmed by these inconsistencies, he grits his teeth in frustration. He admits to himself that he truly understands nothing. He ponders the connection between this world and the game in his memory. He decides not to dwell on it to avoid getting lost in thought. He knows he needs to calm down and find a compromise regarding this connection. Still, with so many complicated things, connecting the dots is hard. He resigns himself to the fact that overthinking won't change anything, and his worries will only increase as time goes on. Verna decides to focus on what he can solve now. His first priority is to form a merchant group to bolster the capital's defenses and equip Mazel's party, which will require a report to his father and his highness. Now that he has a peerage, he can access more documents, which should speed up the process. He also mulls over a suggestion for group training and the Demon King's revival, resolving to seek advice from others. He continues to plan for his upcoming meeting with Regents and Mazel. He decides to make a fair copy of a map before the meeting in 2 days. As he reminds himself to write down his worries, a woman's voice calls his name, sharply interrupting him. As he thinks about a lingering question regarding magic, he is interrupted. His mother calls his name forcefully, and he snaps to attention. Verna is startled by her sudden appearance. With a stern expression, she reminds him that she had heard he was going to take it easy today. Verna apologizes, explaining that he got too immersed, as the butler gently chides him for worrying the staff. His mother then reminds him that he was asleep for the last few days. Verna tries to plead for just a little more time. A fleeting memory of another concerned woman's voice surfaces in his mind. His mother's sharp tone brings him back to reality, and he quickly promises to wash up right away. As she watches him go, his mother reflects that while many things are unclear, one thing is certain. Verna comes to a similar conclusion. No matter the world, making your mother angry is always terrifying. On a sunlit balcony, a young man with curly hair gazes out thoughtfully. His brother, clad in a simple robe, approaches from behind and calls out to him. The straight-haired brother asks if he is heading to train at this hour. His brother affirms the need, stating they must fulfill their duty as knights. He solemnly adds that it is for the sake of Her Highness. The conversation shifts as the younger brother brings up the reconstruction of the Veliza fortress, which his older brother has been appointed to oversee. The older brother explains that Marquis Nab will be in charge, and that their father has instructed him to greet the Marquis upon his arrival. The curly-haired brother invites his sibling to join him. The other asks if the legitimate child will be present as well. He confirms that Mangold will likely be there. His brother agrees to come if he has time, as the knights will also be training. The older brother accepts this, reaffirming his vow to fulfill their duty for the princess. A chaotic training session involving numerous soldiers is underway. Amidst the exhausted men, an instructor calls an end to the day's drills. Verna, mounted on a horse, comments that this training feels different from the stampede battle. The tired soldiers agree, acknowledging the need to be more flexible and accustomed to receiving orders on the fly. Ogden tells Verna this is good, as they must also consider countermeasures for when enemy numbers increase. He then tells Verna that he will be in charge when he's not around, a responsibility Verna accepts. As Verna dismounts, Ogden calls his name to ask him something. Ogden advises Verna that he needs to train his horse more and be more careful when attacking. Verna apologizes and promises to do his best. With a determined look, Ogden announces that he will be Verna's opponent for the day. Verna tells Ogden he's counting on him. As an observer yells for them to begin, the two face off. They clash immediately, their weapons meeting with force. Verna strains against Ogden's powerful blow. Ogden presses his attack, his strength overwhelming Verna. With a swift move, he dodges Verna's counter and lands a decisive blow. Verna is left sitting on the ground, defeated. Ogden stands over him, remarking that he felt a sudden chill for a moment. He adds that it seems Verna has improved. Verna sarcastically says he's glad to hear it, muttering that it was just sarcasm. Ogden explains he had to get serious because Verna has gotten stronger, adding that he needs to catch up to his family's knights. Verna insists he isn't fragile, though he recalls a time he considered running away from the capital before such dreams faded. Verna apologizes for making him get serious, but Ogden says he is proud of him. Another man approaches, noting that Ogden truly didn't pull any punches just now. He offers Verna some advice on improving his spear technique by training his left axis for more stability. Verna internally questions if he can't win because he's just an ordinary person, but dismisses the thought, accepting his opponent was a professional knight. Just then, he's called to head out and confirms he's on his way. As he gets ready, he reflects that being an ordinary person allows him to do more things. He isn't frustrated, he'll just do what he can. As his carriage departs, Verna resolves to do his best, knowing his training time won't be reduced. He arrives at a bustling tavern where a man with a scarred face introduces himself as Regents. Verna introduces himself in return. A young man with them remarks that Verna is just as Mazel described, a nobleman who isn't prideful. Verna internally notes that approaching Regents, who is set up to hate nobles, as a friend of Mazel's was the correct strategy. Regents comments that while he's heard about Verna from someone named Getsuke, meeting him in person is different. Verna recognizes the name Getsuke. He recalls him as the mercenary captain from the Stampede battle, an excellent commander his father had rewarded. He muses on the small world, figuring it's not strange for a mercenary and an adventurer like Regents to know each other. Regents then adds that Getsuke told him Verna is an excellent spearman. Verna is visibly surprised by the compliment. Verna is genuinely delighted by the praise and asks Regents to pass on his gratitude. He honestly feels happy about this. This gives him hope that if he keeps working hard, he might be able to win one day. He knows Getsuke isn't one to give compliments easily, so it must be true. Regents tells Verna to be confident in himself. Verna internally recalls Regents' game stats, a master of weapons. He remembers Regents' role as a physical attacker, like a protagonist's older brother. He now understands why the character was so popular with players of all genders. The young man with them admits Verna is very different from what he imagined. The young man admits he was wrong about his assumptions. Regents suggests they eat and drink in the meantime. He cuts to the chase, asking Verna his real intentions for wanting to meet. Verna counters, stating Regents must have a reason for taking the trouble to call him. He asks if a mercenary and an adventurer can keep secrets, to which Regents confidently agrees. Werner calmly states that it appears the Demon King has revived. His friend Mazel chokes in surprise at the sudden revelation. The scarred adventurer Regents dismisses it as a bad joke, but Werner insists he is serious. Werner explains that a noisy public place is perfect for a private conversation, as it avoids the unwanted attention a meeting at a noble's house would attract. Regents concedes the point, remarking that Werner doesn't act like a typical student, just as Mazel had told him. Regents stares Werner down, demanding to know what he was told. Werner clarifies that his earlier comment was meant as a compliment. Accepting the explanation, Regents asks why he's being told something so important. Werner gets straight to the point. He wants Regents to join forces with Mazel. He explains that if the news is true, Mazel will be ordered by His Majesty to go on a subjugation mission. Regents asks Mazel if he understands what he is getting into, but Mazel resolutely declares his desire to help. Werner explains that he is acting as a liaison between Mazel and the royal family, but as a nation, they are limited without certainty. Mazel explains that he is still just a student and lacks the experience of an adventurer. He directly asks Regents to team up with him, wanting to learn from his real-world experience. With a look of earnest desperation, Mazel pleads for his help. Moved by the plea, Regents agrees, telling Mazel he looks forward to his growth. Mazel is ecstatic, thanking him and eagerly looking forward to working with him. Regents asks what they need him to do, keeping things casual. Werner steps in, ready to present his plan. Mazel looks at the chaotic, hand-drawn map in disbelief. Regents is equally confused, asking what the document is, while Mazel acknowledges how strange it looks. Werner admits the map looks bad, but promises to explain everything. After hearing the explanation, Regents understands the purpose, to dispatch a merchant caravan for equipment. Werner tasks Regents with finding reliable adventurers and mercenaries to escort the merchants, and Regents agrees. Mazel worries about the cost, but Werner reassures him that while his family will initially fund it, the state will eventually pay. Werner explains his father, a minister, has already secured approval from the crown prince, who is aware of the Demon King's revival. Mazel jokes about selling the valuable map to make back the money. Werner playfully tells him not to sell it. Regents remarks on how strange Werner is for having this knowledge. Mazel is amazed, admitting he knows the location of every town despite never having seen a map. Werner downplays his knowledge, stating his map is just a tiny fraction of the world. He internally recalls that maps are state secrets, so he had to create his own using fragmented information. Werner remembers digging up memories from the game to create a world map listing important locations. Mazel and Regents agree that Werner's knowledge is more akin to a scholar's than a student's. Werner muses that for most people, life goes on without knowing about the Demon King. He recalls a realization he had while making the map. Many towns from the game weren't mentioned and lacked influential lords. He remembers that this only happened in towns where a demon had supplanted the ruler. This grim realization motivates Mazel to train harder. Shaking off the thought, Werner gives Mazel directions. Werner points out a nearby forest with an old shrine, suggesting it as a training ground for them. Rugence is baffled as to how he knows this, and Werner claims an interest in demon ecology. He privately thinks that he can't possibly admit it was an early game grinding spot. Rugence comments on Mazel's strange friends, and Mazel agrees that the spot sounds perfect for training. Mazel decides they should go there when they don't have classes to practice fighting alongside Rugence. As they make plans, Werner's thoughts drift to the ruins of Veritza Fortress, sensing that another major event from the game is about to begin. Werner recalls that the fortress was still in use in the game, meaning the renovation should take some time. As Rugence and Mazel decide to get going, Werner's thoughts turn inward. He knows that no matter how much he prepares, everything will ultimately be left to the heroes, and the best he can do is help them gain experience. He accepts that he would only slow them down if he tried to keep up. He resolves to do what he can to support them from the sidelines. Mazel and Rugence bid Werner farewell, saying they will see him at school. Werner waves goodbye, hoping for their reunion. Left alone, Werner feels the stress of his secret knowledge, clutching his stomach as he thinks about the major event unfolding tomorrow. Elsewhere, in a stately hall, high-ranking officials turn their attention to the Veritza Fortress. A wavy-haired nobleman reports that the fortress renovation will begin as soon as the Marquis arrives. His bearded superior asks for any new information regarding the Demon King's revival. The subordinate confirms the reorganization of the knights is proceeding well with few casualties. The bearded noble then shifts the topic, asking about the Viscount's situation. The bearded noble inquires about the Count's influence, and his subordinate reports that he seems to be a genuine friend with no hidden agenda. He recalls Werner's own report, stating his sincere desire for friendship, and that his behavior has been consistent. The bearded noble accepts this for now and asks about the hero. He is told that Viscount Zerfeld Werner was instrumental in the matter at the school and decides to entrust the rest to his subordinate. The bearded noble sees the benefit in Werner acting as an intermediary for the hero. His subordinate agrees, though he notes it's not a typical noble's move. The bearded noble observes that Werner possesses great talent and an impeccable background, making him a good candidate for a close aide. The wavy-haired noble decides it might be worth keeping an eye on him. He plans to meet with him the next day to assess his worth, an idea his superior endorses. With a curious smile, the wavy-haired noble wonders what Werner will do next, admitting that he is looking forward to it. Continuing his work, Werner sits at his desk, attempting to recreate a map from memory, worried that he will be in trouble if his notes are discovered. He then has a brilliant idea. He'll write down the information in scattered fragments, disguised as random drawings to avoid detection. He carefully secures a piece of paper, determined that no one will see his secret work. Suddenly, the family butler's voice startles him, asking if the young master is drawing. Werner panics as his mother and the butler stare down at his work. His mother's eyes narrow as she examines the drawing, a flash of realization crossing her face. She correctly identifies the creature as a hunter wolf. Flustered but relieved, Werner eagerly confirms her guess. The butler reassures him that it's all about practice, and his mother praises how well he captured the monster's ferocity. Just then, Werner's father appears in the doorway, drawn by the conversation. Werner's mother proudly shows her husband the picture their son drew. His father takes the drawing to have a closer look. After a moment of inspection, he dismissively asks if the chaotic scribble is supposed to be a vase. The atmosphere immediately becomes tense. Humiliated, Werner snatches the paper back and declares he will go practice more. He makes a hasty retreat, leaving his baffled family behind. Alone once more, Werner reflects on his family's reactions to his drawing. He considers that perhaps they dismiss his work simply because he is a child. He realizes this gives him the perfect cover, allowing him to act boldly without raising suspicion. A confident smirk plays on his lips as he grasps this new advantage. In this world, the 7-day week is named after concepts like agriculture, commerce, and prayer. Werner finds it strange that despite the polytheistic-sounding names for the days, the world is monotheistic. Today, the Day of Nativity, is a holiday, even for the royal family. Werner meets with a high-ranking royal figure, who finds his report quite interesting. Werner explains he wanted to get approval before acting, and asks to present the equipment in person before it's officially adopted by the knights. The royal commends Werner for informing him in advance. The royal questions if such high-quality weapons can truly be procured, and Werner confirms his research suggests so, though the royal notes all known ancient ruins in the country have been explored. Werner silently recalls how he overlooked this detail in the game, since his starting point was the capital. Werner internally puzzles over why the capital has only initial-level equipment despite an abundance of luxury goods. He wonders why frontier towns have better gear at better prices, a fact even Lugwins confirmed. He explains to the royal that excavation records show all valuable items have already been sold, leaving only those with research value. Werner reveals his conclusion: the high-level equipment comes from the tombs of an ancient kingdom, which is essentially tomb robbing. Werner elaborates that reports from the ancient kingdom's burial sites show bodies were interred fully armed. This explains the abundance of identical, high-quality items found in tombs and labyrinths. Consequently, towns and villages have formed around these ruins to sell the excavated armor and items. The royal figure accepts this, though he points out the exact number of such sites is unknown. He muses that perhaps their kingdom's overwhelming military might meant they never had to worry about equipment before. Werner internally questions why knowledge of this powerful equipment is not more widespread. He decides to report on it anyway, and the royal figure gives him the go-ahead. An aide confirms he will inform Marquis Knipe about the potential demon army attack, which Werner acknowledges would be a great help. The royal notes that the capital's proximity to Fort Warisa makes an early warning system a great advantage. With no further business, the royal asks Werner to report any new developments immediately before dismissing him. After Werner departs, the royal figure asks his aides for their opinion of the young man. One aide remarks that Werner is remarkably composed and logical for his age. The other agrees, adding that it's a shame he is merely the son of a count, suggesting his talents are worthy of a higher station. The royal figure acknowledges the serious issue of valuable excavated items potentially flowing to foreign countries. His aide states that it's never too late to take action. The royal resolves to take measures, ordering inquiries around excavation personnel should any new ruins be discovered. An assistant at the Bierstedt merchant house immediately recognizes Werner and welcomes him as Viscount Zerfeld. The assistant invites Werner to a private room in the back. Werner is surprised to be recognized so quickly, a testament to the influence of the Bierstedt merchant house. He is asked to wait for a moment, as Bierstedt himself will be with him shortly. As he waits, Werner reflects that his previous purchase of aromatic oils should have secured some goodwill with the merchant house. He is thankful for the large reward the country provided him. He knows he must stay sharp while dealing with a seasoned merchant. Still, he finds this far more relaxing than his meeting with royalty, where a single misstep could have been fatal. Just then, the representative, Bierstedt, enters and apologizes for keeping him waiting. Bierstedt introduces himself as the representative, and Werner reassures him that no apology is needed, as his own visit was unannounced. Bierstedt thanks him for his considerate words. He thanks Werner for the large order, but expresses surprise that the Viscount came in person. Bierstedt then commends Werner for his remarkable efforts during the monster stampede, while Werner thanks him for agreeing to their sudden deal. Werner requests the formation of a merchant caravan to make some purchases, for which he will provide guards. He presents Bierstedt with a list of towns to visit and items to purchase. Werner also asks him to check the available stock in each location, and Bierstedt agrees to take a look. The merchant finds the request unusual, yet remarkably thorough. Werner muses that the list makes it seem like he's planning to start his own business. Bierstedt notes that the recent monster stampede was different from others. Werner confirms he is aware that demons caused the stampede. The merchant warns that if the demons could do it once, they could do it again. He explains that his merchant information network is aware of the demons, as there has been no official order to keep it quiet. Werner explains that due to his new reputation as a military man, he needs to prepare his equipment. Bierstedt understands, acknowledging Werner's distinguished service in the recent battle. Werner accepts the compliment, stating that the royal family naturally has high expectations. The merchant cautions that this will not be a simple task and the cost will be significant, which Werner understands. Werner places an initial order of 8 sets of armor and weapons for the Count's household, assuring Bierstedt he will cover the costs. He privately laments that financial constraints prevent him from equipping the palace soldiers as well. Werner's immediate goal is to make the higher-ups aware that such equipment exists, hoping to rely on country funds later. When Bierstedt asks if he can purchase more, Werner readily agrees, so long as the Count's household is supplied first. He gives the merchant house permission to buy and sell any extra items as they see fit. If the merchant house sells the items in the capital, it will help spread awareness and strengthen their defenses. Werner explains that while a typical noble would monopolize the profit, he believes it is meaningless if there is no one left to use the equipment. Bierstedt is unfamiliar with the towns on the list, but Werner explains he has a map and a border crossing permit from His Highness. The merchant eagerly asks for a copy of the map. Werner internally notes the merchant's sly eagerness to get the map. Bierstedt agrees, privately wondering if Werner is wise enough to avoid risks or has another reason for his transparency. Bierstedt questions whether the equipment Werner expects will actually be there, a concern Werner understands. Werner concedes there's no definitive proof that the equipment sold in the game exists in this world. However, he reasons that the frontier towns must have high-level gear and magic barriers to survive against the powerful local monsters. To ease the merchant's concerns, Werner promises to cover all travel expenses even if they can't purchase the items. He grimly notes that as the demon army's invasion increases, the safety of travel will only continue to decline. He needs to establish these trade routes before the situation worsens, making it impossible to investigate or purchase goods. As he leaves the merchant house, Werner considers the possibility of hoarding, which could weaken regional defenses. However, he is confident that each country will take measures to prevent that. Right now, his primary concern is his own nation, especially since the total number of available items is an unknown factor. Considering the movements near Fort Warisa, he has no choice but to prioritize his actions. His next stop is the Adventurers Guild. Inside a clattering carriage, Werner sits in quiet contemplation. He reflects on the dangers of greed and overestimating his own power. He knows that such a mistake would ruin not only himself but others as well. His destination is the Adventurers Guild, where a friendly receptionist welcomes him and asks how she can help. Werner, looking slightly flustered, approaches the counter. He tells the receptionist he'd like to hire a few people, and she agrees to show him the way. As she leads him away, he wonders how such a pretty girl can handle the rough adventurers, musing that perhaps her appearance is precisely why they wouldn't dare cause trouble. She shows him into a soundproof room. Inside, a man with a wild grin greets him as Viscount Zerfeld. The guildmaster gets straight to the point, asking what business Werner has. Werner explains he needs to hire scouts for an investigation into monster frequency and security at specified locations. Given the number of sites, he estimates needing about 20 scouts in total, a number the guildmaster finds quite large. Werner clarifies that he wants to assign candidates based on their preferences and abilities, allowing them to decline after hearing the details and offering hazard pay for dangerous locations. The guildmaster notes that with such flexible terms, they won't be able to state the exact rewards up front. Werner assures him that the minimum reward will be increased based on the difficulty of the site, and he will pay the guild's fee with extra. Satisfied, the guildmaster thanks him and asks for the locations. After the lengthy meeting, Werner feels a sense of relief. He had been worried the guildmaster might suspect him of preparing for war, but the misunderstanding was cleared, as the man seemed to prefer avoiding political conflicts. With that, the initial arrangements for the scouts are complete. Werner believes that when the scouts return, their information will be shared with the guild, providing crucial intelligence to help reduce casualties. He then approaches the Mercenaries Guild. A receptionist welcomes him, and Werner states he's there to request protection for a merchant caravan. It's noted that the Adventurers and Mercenaries Guilds are housed in the same building, though the difference between the two professions can be hard to define. Adventurers are jacks of all trades, typically operating in small groups for various tasks like dungeon exploration. Mercenaries, however, specialize in combat and often organize into companies for long-term, structured jobs. Werner glances around, taking in the scene. He finds the contrasting atmospheres of the two guilds interesting, though he notes the mercenaries' side seems to reek more of alcohol. He sits down with the Mercenaries Guildmaster, a large man with bandaged eyes, to discuss the specifics of his escort request. The Guildmaster remarks on the large scale of the request. Werner confirms he'll need around 150 people, including replacements, and intends to pay a reasonable fee, for which the Guildmaster thanks him. The guild functions as a mutual aid organization, providing security and support for its members. Maintaining the building, paying salaries, and covering various compensations costs a lot of money, funded by commissions and selling monster materials. Werner knows that while it's painful for his own finances, he can't skimp on these expenses if he wants his plans to move forward. The guildmaster asks about the selection of people for the mission. Werner replies that he has asked Luguntz Laser and Oliver Goecki to handle the selection. The guildmaster is impressed by the choice, calling them an impressive duo. The guildmaster muses that people with such a reputation, along with their friends, will probably end up in the hero's party, a comment Werner takes as a compliment. With the matter on hold until the guild is ready, Werner considers his next move, but a voice calls out to him. A young man leans in, asking if the Viscount has a job for them. The boy introduces himself as Feli and eagerly asks Werner to tell him about the job. Werner is internally surprised, recognizing that not only is Laura a factor, but now this boy, Feli, is here as well. Werner's attendant takes an order for fruit juices, nuts, and dried fruits. Feli casually thanks the generous Viscount as he plops down on the seat. This is Felix Ernert, the 14-year-old, top-notch scout of the hero's party, whose skills are said to make any dungeon clearable. Werner comments that Feli recognized him, and Feli replies that any adventurer in the capital who doesn't know the Viscount must be a novice. Feli adds that Werner's ponytail also makes him easy to recognize. Feli curiously touches Werner's ponytail, asking how long he's been growing it. Werner replies it's been about 10 years. Feli remarks that it must be hard to wash, and Werner admits it can be a hassle. Feli then asks what the Viscount is trying to do. Werner explains he's simply going on a shopping trip to various towns to buy what he needs. Feli playfully reframes this as scooping up or hoarding everything, which Werner says is not a good way to put it. Werner flatly tells him that's totally wrong. Werner observes that Feli is friendly and good at getting close to people. He also thinks about Feli's other skills, like pickpocketing, before asking him what he wants to do now. Feli replies that he's not looking for anything in particular, as long as it's interesting. Recalling his past life, Werner recognizes this type of personality simple but challenging. Seeing an opportunity, he asks Feli if he would be interested in taking on a thrilling job, despite the hassle. Feli's interest is piqued, and he asks what kind of job it is. Werner is pleased to have grabbed his attention. He considers how best to utilize this super talented scout from the hero's party. He weighs his options, having Feli help gather information in the capital, or having him accompany the merchant caravan to scout the terrain and towns. He realizes that if they can acquire the flying boots item during the expedition, it would be extremely useful after Feli joins the hero's party. Having made his decision, Werner formally asks Feli to accompany the merchant caravan they talked about earlier. Werner explains that the situation has likely changed as a result of the recent monster stampede. Feli thinks the job sounds like a pain that will take a long time, but Werner sweetens the deal by offering him the chance to eat delicious food in various towns, with a stipend for eating out on top of his daily wages. Feli concedes that it does sound like a delicious proposal. Werner internally weighs the cost, deciding that the potential benefits make it a small price to pay. He senses that while he has Feli's interest, the scout is still somewhat stuck on the decision. To seal the deal, Werner invites Feli to a get-together at his place after the next day of hunting. He tells him to come if he feels like it. He then tosses a heavy pouch of coins to Feli, telling him it's for travel costs. Feli is shocked by the amount, but Werner insists it's a show of sincerity and that the money is his whether he accepts the job or not. He tells Feli he won't complain if he uses it to eat his fill or gives it away. Werner knows that Feli is supposed to be from an orphanage and has the right personality to travel with the hero's party, doubting he has distanced himself from them. Werner prepares to leave, asking if they should get going. Feli remains seated for a moment, clutching the money pouch. Suddenly, he dashes out after Werner, calling his title. He stops and shouts a heartfelt thank you. As he walks away, Werner reflects that his move was a bit of a gamble. He worried Feli might become wary of him, but ultimately, he has a good feeling about how things turned out. The city streets are filled with the usual morning clamor, as citizens go about their day with a mix of complaints and worries. A few men discuss the recent monster stampede, expressing their fear. One tries to reassure another, mentioning that the renowned Marcus Nape and his knights will be with them. Suddenly, a heavily armored knight barrels through the crowd, demanding they make way. The imposing Marcus Knipe rides through the city, his presence causing a stir. His men shout at the craftsmen, ordering them to the back of the line. Watching from above, Avant remarks on the commotion, explaining that Marcus Knipe is leaving for Fort Warisa. Werner listens, a slight grin on his face as he confirms the information. Werner internally grumbles about the tedious greetings and formalities that come with nobility. Because of these protocols, they can't get to work right away. He had been concerned that the new developments might halt the planned renovations for the fort. However, he is glad to see that the work seems to be proceeding as planned. Werner theorizes that a corrective force might be influencing events, but its scope and rules are unclear. He recalls that during the stampede, Mazel's team was the one to discover the demons, a turn of events he considers a positive manifestation of this force. But this leads to a darker thought. Could those who escaped their original fate, like the Crown Prince, be destined to die in some other way? The weight of this possibility settles on him. If fate is immutable, it would be a huge problem. He finds some comfort in the fact that the knight's primary duty is to protect the royals, and their defenses are strong. Furthermore, his own continued existence as the catalyst for these changes might indicate that the alterations are not seen as critical errors. But a troubling inconsistency remains. He realizes that before the stampede, he had no memory of the crown prince or his grandson, even though he should have. He is left to ponder the meaning of this selective amnesia. He remembers the second princess and the king, but strangely nothing about the first princess. He speculates whether a meeting with her would fill this gap, or if a force within the royal family is obscuring her existence. But then, he reasons he should have at least known Marquess Knipe's name, yet he'd never heard it before. This suggests his memory is being influenced by the game's framework, limiting his knowledge. A bell rings, pulling him from his deep contemplation. Even so, he cannot ignore the lingering feeling of unease. He decides that this is all he can do about the matter for the time being. Addressing the gathered party, Werner introduces himself and thanks them for attending the meeting concerning the merchant caravan. Mazel Harding speaks first, stating he was recognized by the king for his actions and is now seeking to better prepare for the monster threat. Lugwins Laser, an adventurer, introduces himself as the one handling research and arrangements. Frenson announces he is the assistant butler of the Zerfeld family and will be acting as Werner's representative on the caravan. Lugwins seems to think he should add more, as a noble, but decides against it. Oliver Gecki identifies himself as a mercenary tasked with escorting the caravan. Avant introduces himself as the leader of the caravan from the Bierstedt merchant house. Feli cheerfully announces that he will also be joining the journey. He then proposes that since time is precious, everyone should dispense with formal language. Frenson is momentarily taken aback by the suggestion of informality. He asks Werner if he must also speak informally. Werner gives him an out, but Feli encourages him to go along with it, and Frenson concedes. Werner then moves the meeting forward. He asks Lugwins to report on the situation, who states that he and Mazel found that the monsters at a nearby shrine were unlike any they'd seen before. Mazel confirms this, admitting he was wrong to assume they were merely leftovers from the stampede. Avant corroborates the story, mentioning reports from other merchants about new types of monsters appearing. He admits that while he anticipated some difficulty, this could be very hard on those not accustomed to rough travel. Werner voices his concern that the caravan might be more dangerous than initially planned and seeks confirmation. Oliver states that it's simply part of the job and they will take extra precautions to protect the cargo. Werner is privately relieved, thankful to have a capable leader like Oliver for the escort, whom he hired based on the good impression he made during the stampede. Feli chimes in, saying he isn't bothered by the danger either, as it simply calls for greater caution. Werner cautions that the job will be difficult, but Feli accepts without hesitation. Werner reflects on his surprise at Feli's eagerness, a stark contrast to his initial worry that Feli might not accept the job at all. Mazel leans over and whispers to Werner, questioning if it's truly all right for someone like Feli to come along. Werner vouches for Feli's abilities, and Mazel accepts his judgment. Mazel internally questions his own quick acceptance, feeling he should be more doubtful. Clearing his throat, Werner comments that Feli's motivation is a welcome asset. Feli begins to explain his reasons. He reveals that a child at his orphanage was gravely ill, and they lacked the funds for medicine or a doctor, which is why he was searching for work. Werner understands now why Feli was initially reluctant to commit to a long mission. Feli explains that the advance payment from Werner allowed them to get the necessary medical care. Because of this, he feels indebted to Werner and is determined to complete the job. Werner clarifies that he is happy to have helped, but he did not mean for the money to be seen as a debt. He also asks Feli to stop using his formal title, to which Feli gives a simple grunt. Werner wonders to himself if this is a form of manipulation, surprised at how effective his gesture was. His focus then turns to the person he is most concerned about. Avant calmly states that he has no issue with the plan. Werner questions his certainty, but Avant excitedly explains that a dangerous journey means higher profits. Werner marvels at the merchant's intense focus on profit, wryly thinking that merchants are truly a resilient bunch. Lugwins begins to detail his preparations, explaining that he has already dispatched scouts to a town and a nearby village. Werner looks over the documents and asks if the names listed are the people in charge, questioning if there's a problem. Lugwins confesses that he had instructed them not to list him as a decision-maker. Lugwins quickly dismisses Werner's concern, saying it is nothing. Werner reassures the group that they can still make changes, and a maid confirms that everything is in order. Mazel elaborates that the scouts will be assessing various factors like monster presence and the safety of lodging locations. Oliver confirms they can adjust the route based on scout reports and then asks who holds the ultimate authority on such decisions. Werner announces that Oliver will have the final say, a role that would typically fall to Frentzen. Frentzen agrees, acknowledging his own inexperience with monsters and dangerous travel. Frentzen expresses his gratitude and confirms that an agreement has been reached, which he will formalize in writing. Werner notices Avant staring at him thoughtfully. With no more questions, Werner moves to the next topic. He reveals the official purpose of the Caravan, to prepare for a future increase in monster activity. Internally, he laments that he cannot share the full truth about the Demon Lord, which would expedite matters. Werner then shifts the topic to the kingdom's decision to repair Fort Warisa, which he believes is a strategic mistake. Feli and Avant both question his assessment. He elaborates that the fort is too close to the capital and too poorly defended to serve as a proper refuge. From a demon's perspective, he explains, the partially restored fort would be a perfect staging ground, or bridgehead, for a larger assault. Luguins and Oliver concur, recognizing that clever demons would exploit such an opportunity, making an attack on the fort a much easier prospect than assaulting the capital directly. Feli playfully prods Werner, asking what his plan is. Luguins states that he has already offered his suggestions to the kingdom, but their reception is uncertain. Frentzen adds that they must prepare for unforeseen events. He proposes sharing a worst-case scenario plan for if the fort is lost. Werner lays out his first directive. Even if the fort is attacked or taken, the caravan should not immediately return to the capital, but instead focus on its own goals. Oliver immediately questions this strategy. Werner explains his reasoning. He fears their weapons could be confiscated to aid in reclaiming the fort. Mazel seems skeptical of this explanation. Oliver supports Werner's caution, pointing out that any enemy intelligent enough to take the fort would also have a plan to defend it, making its reclamation difficult. Werner agrees, adding that the fort's capture would serve as a bridgehead for the enemy's next move. Mazel correctly deduces the grim implication. The ultimate target would be the royal capital itself. As a maid serves refreshments, she muses that fighting at the fort would be strategically sound, a sentiment Feli agrees with. Werner's internal thought reveals his true goal. He needs the hero to be the one to reclaim the fort. He explains that the fall of the fort will force the demons to reveal the Demon King's existence, giving Mazel the perfect opportunity to act. The kingdom's leadership is currently too complacent and dismissive of the threat. Werner needs a dramatic event to force both the nobles and the common people to acknowledge the hero's importance, ensuring the weapons arrive at the crucial moment. He tells Mazel and Luguins to continue their training, and Luguins eagerly agrees. Mazel, however, expresses his reluctance. He asks why they can't simply use their current strength to help defend the fort and prevent its fall. Werner acknowledges Mazel's heroic sentiment, but advises against it. He explains that at this stage, Mazel is merely a commoner with a special skill. Even if Marquis Knipe allowed him to join, his status would mean his actions would be severely limited. Werner elaborates that if the defense succeeded, the nobles would try to take credit and control the hero, restricting his freedom. Avant agrees, noting the political complications of a commoner joining a noble's battle. Werner lays out the worst-case scenario. Mazel could be blamed for any failure, becoming a convenient scapegoat. Though he wants to save as many people as possible, Werner knows that for his grand plan to work, the fort has to be lost. Mazel quietly considers the possibility that the nobles might successfully defend the fort on their own, or that no attack might come at all. Werner advises Mazel that even if he were to assist, the fort's fall is still a possibility, so he should not act rashly and instead save his strength. Mazel reluctantly accepts this grim logic. Luguins vows to propose measures to the Crown Prince to prevent as many casualties as possible in the event of an attack. Werner adds that he too will push for these measures to be accepted, though he knows it may not be enough. He privately considers the burden of his knowledge. If others knew he could see what was coming, their gratitude would likely turn to resentment and disappointment. He knows that speaking of the future would make him a target of suspicion and political strife, comparing his potential fate to that of Cassandra. Mazel accepts the situation, thanking Werner for the explanation and promising to be ready. Werner declares that they are only human and can only do their best, a sentiment Mazel agrees with. Seeing how late it has gotten, Werner decides to end the meeting. He asks if there is anything else before they adjourn for the night. As the group disperses, Mazel calls out to Werner, asking for a private word. Werner agrees, assuming Mazel wants to discuss the difficult plan for the fort, but Mazel assures him he has come to terms with it. Mazel expresses his understanding that Werner is a different kind of noble. Werner listens silently. While he is grateful for Werner's trust, Mazel firmly declares that he will focus on becoming stronger. Werner offers a simple reassurance: "You'll be fine." As he departs, Mazel thanks Werner for the day and tells him to rest, also encouraging him to attend school the next day. Mazel explains that while he won't force him, their political science professor has been complaining about not having anyone to explain things to. Werner groans, muttering about "that guy." He informs Mazel that the caravan preparations are nearly complete, and the two nod to each other in understanding. As Mazel waves and walks away, Werner reflects that he probably caused him unnecessary worry. The thought of school reminds him he still has questions for the magic professor, making him resolve to go the next day. He decides to finish his work quickly to prepare for the morning. Far away, in the outskirts of Zbrulitz, a massive, fiery monster stomps through the wilderness. The scouts cry out in shock and terror. They are overwhelmed by the sudden appearance of monsters in the town. Their leader yells at them to remain calm. He senses something unusual is happening as the sounds of battle and destruction echo around them. The monsters stomp through the town, leaving destruction in their wake. A grotesque, fiery creature with a menacing grin appears before the survivors. The scouts look on in absolute horror at the unfolding nightmare. From the shadows, a massive jaw filled with razor-sharp teeth gives a sinister smirk. A tense meeting of nobles is violently interrupted by a messenger who bursts through the doors. Apologizing for the disturbance, he is urgently asked to explain his sudden appearance, beginning his report on a dire situation in Salznak's town of Zbrulitz. The nobles react with shock and disbelief as the messenger reports that Zbrulitz has been destroyed in a demon tribe attack. He delivers the most chilling detail: the demons spoke of the revival of the Demon King. Elsewhere, Werner considers his day, figuring a carriage ride will get him to the academy in time for the third period. He hopes the professor's schedule is free. His train of thought is suddenly broken by a cry as a maid trips and falls directly into his path. Reacting quickly, Werner catches the falling maid. He asks if she is okay. She apologizes profusely, though he reassures her that he is fine. As they steady themselves, a condescending voice calls out, noting the presence of Viscount Zerfeld. The newcomer, Gunther, sarcastically remarks on the misfortune of being splashed with water. Werner immediately realizes the incident was orchestrated. The timid maid explains that many servants in the castle have ties to nobility, making them easy targets for coercion. Gunther introduces himself as Count Siegel's heir and dismisses the maid. Werner finds the harassment distasteful and decides to intervene. A young woman arrives, introducing herself as Hermine, daughter of Bastian Timo I. Gunther greets her with surprise. Hermione states that her father wishes to speak with Viscount Zerfeld about the recent demon stampede. Upon hearing the name Count first, Gunther makes a hasty retreat. Hermine then thanks Werner. Hermine apologizes if she overstepped, but Werner sincerely thanks her, admitting she was a great help. He internally reflects on the awkwardness of using honorifics based on rank rather than age. Hermine again expresses her gratitude for Werner's actions during the demon stampede. Werner smiles, relieved that thanks to her intervention, he can now get to school without being too late. They bid each other farewell. After Werner's departure, Hermine is approached by her father. She explains that she just met Viscount Zerfeld, who was on his way to school. She adds that it was a little disappointing not to have a proper conversation with him. Her father listens, then thoughtfully murmurs the word, "mine." Werner thinks to himself that he probably should explain the situation. Arriving at the academy, Werner is greeted by a friend who crosses his arms and asks what's going on with him. His friend comments that Werner looks like a total mess, to which he replies that a lot has happened. His friend continues, noting that things at the academy have settled down. He recounts the recent buzz surrounding Mazel's invitation to the academy. The rumors of noble families aggressively pursuing him and his subsequent withdrawal from school to focus on his studies has caused the interest around him to die down. The friend speculates on other reasons for students withdrawing. He suspects the royal family must have pulled some strings to help Mazel. Werner is just glad Mazel now has an environment where he can focus on defeating the Demon King. His friend then leans in close with a smirk. His friend playfully puts an arm around Werner. He tells Werner he should make the most of his own student life. He suggests perhaps even helping fellow students with their studies. Their chat is cut short when another student rushes over, announcing that the professor is asking for Werner right away. The group understands the summons is important. Realizing the summons is about magical studies, Werner's friend quickly makes his exit. The student who brought the message, Mazel, apologizes for the abruptness, explaining it would be best to contact Werner beforehand since they're in the same class. Mazel cheerfully insists it's no problem, as he enjoys helping out. He then asks Werner if it's true that he only takes the mandatory magic classes. Werner internally reflects on his lack of magical aptitude in this world of swords and sorcery. He knows that with enough time and effort, even someone without skills can use magic, but for some, it could take a lifetime. Werner admits to himself he gave up on magic early on. Mazel points out that Werner's ability to handle weapons, magic, and holy magic is more than enough. The conversation reminds Werner of a recent talk with Lugwins about their need for a strong healer for future battles. They agree that a cleric with healing and defensive holy magic would be a reassuring asset, especially since Lugwins himself can't use magic. Werner also notes that Feli isn't really part of their magic combat force either. Werner recalls the original story's progression. A monk capable of using holy magic for attacks is supposed to join the hero's party, followed by Princess Laura. He also feels reassured by the fact that the merchant Caravan will bring powerful equipment and that the party has been leveling up. Despite these reassurances, he knows he can't be certain of what lies ahead for the hero's party. Werner advises Mazel to bring as many recovery items as possible, adding that he will also keep an eye out for any trustworthy and skilled individuals they could recruit. Mazel thanks him. Werner then asks if, in an emergency, Mazel could use recovery magic as needed so long as he has magic recovery potions. Mazel expresses concern, noting there might be situations they can't handle without access to intermediate or advanced level magic. Mazel wants to confirm something. If he had an unlimited supply of magic recovery potions, could he use magic indefinitely? Werner supposes that's probably true. Mazel seems amazed that the potions are so effective. Werner explains he was just wondering about how they work. He initially thought they functioned like food, providing energy and nourishment. He figured magic recovery potions worked the same way, by replenishing the body. Werner continues his thought experiment. If a magic recovery potion is just a chunk of magical energy, throwing it at an enemy could potentially turn it into an attack. He even speculates that with some modification, it could be made to explode. Suddenly, a voice from behind them calls it an interesting idea. It's the professor, who apologizes for keeping them waiting. Mazel thanks the professor for his time and introduces Werner. The professor recognizes the name Werner von Zerfeld, recalling that while his practical skills were lacking, his thesis was excellent. Werner thanks him for the compliment. The professor then asks if their discussion about recovery potions is related to their meeting. Werner confirms that it is. The professor decides that talking in the hall is not ideal and invites them into his office for some herbal tea. After listening to Werner's theory, he states that he mostly understands the concept. However, he notes there is no existing evidence to support what Werner is suggesting. Werner thinks to himself that this is exactly why he came, to discuss countermeasures for restrictive magic. Werner explains that while this world's technology resembles the Middle Ages, its magic possesses power comparable to modern weapons. Werner asks the professor to wait a moment as he continues his explanation. He warns that even the weakest enemies in the dungeons of the Four Heavenly Kings will use restrictive magic. These are the same forces that will soon attack the royal capital, which is why countermeasures are necessary. If the capital were to be attacked, their options would be severely limited. He elaborates that while counterspells do exist, the enemy will overwhelmingly outnumber them, leading to a slow but certain defeat. That's why he has been searching for another way, a clue, to work around the magic system itself. He begins to pose a fundamental question. In a world with such advanced military power, why is a small group of elite heroes sent to defeat the Demon King? Based on his knowledge from a previous life, an all-out attack with all available forces seems far more logical. Werner concludes that there must be a reason why a small, elite group is the better option. The professor confirms that, as expected, his research shows mana potions only restore mana. He adds there is scarce information on how they actually function, though there are many studies on their technical applications. While there have been studies on repurposing them for offensive use, the results were said to be difficult. Werner then asks about the correlation between the number of magic users in an area and the strength of their individual magic. The professor finds this question very interesting. The professor says he has a few ideas. He uses the example of fire magic practice at the school. When dozens of students use magic all at once, nothing serious ever happens. However, he has observed that if a few students stay behind to practice in the same spot, injuries can sometimes occur, though they are easily treatable. He admits this is just his own experience. He adds that there may be other factors to consider. The professor is intrigued, believing further research could lead to a deeper understanding of magic. He believes it would greatly benefit magical education as well. He suggests Werner also speak with court magicians and monks, who might have different research findings. He offers to write a letter to a former student who might understand these ideas. Mazel thanks Werner for his help. The professor even asks Werner to consider transferring to the magic department, to which Werner agrees to think about it. As they leave, Mazel reflects on this new perspective. He tells Werner that the intensity of his magic when fighting alongside Lugans is completely different from when he practices with everyone at the academy. He had never questioned it before, but Werner points out that this proves there's an entirely different reason behind it. Werner explains his hypothesis that the limit of magic that can be used only holds up within a certain range. He likens it to how using too many appliances at once can trip a circuit breaker. The main problem now is figuring out how to confirm it. His first step will be to talk to the people the professor mentioned. He thanks Mazel for helping his talk with the professor go smoothly. Werner mentions that tomorrow he'll go over the items the Merchant Guild has gathered so far. Werner says that if he has time, he'll look into who the professor's letter of recommendation is for. Mazel offers his help with anything else. Werner acknowledges his offer. He resolves that in order to prepare for the defense of the royal capital, they cannot skip training in group combat and anti-magic measures. While confrontations with nobles are avoidable, he doesn't want to look like a fool for suggesting necessary group training. Walking through the castle halls, Werner considers the political complexities of gathering people, which could lead to the formation of strange factions. If the nation took the lead, funding would come from taxes. But justifying spending on unfamiliar military tactics would be difficult in a culture that respects the spirit of chivalry. Deciding he's been overthinking, he resolves to set those concerns aside. He must focus on the immediate priority, preparing for the merchant caravan's departure and handling matters related to Fort Warisa. Buried in his work, Werner wonders when he'll get to be a student again. A vivid image flashes in his mind of a cheerful Feli, part of the departing caravan, shouting a hearty, "I'm off." The day of departure arrives, and the party, including a lively Feli and other companions, gather. Werner watches them from a distance. He sees his friends Lugans, Mazel, and others ready to set off. Standing at the edge of a dense forest, the small group prepares to venture forth. Mazel tells the others that it's time for them to head out as well. With a final look back, they begin their journey. The official announcement is made. The neighboring country of Salznak has fallen, and the Demon King has been resurrected. This happened a few days after the party's departure. A lone rider gallops through a training ground, his horse kicking up dust and debris as soldiers practice nearby. One young knight unleashes a fierce strike. The display is observed with a calm, knowing smile. An older commander praises the group's efforts, noting that their progress is excellent, and Werner agrees. The commander is confident that with their current skill level, they can easily teach the other squads, and he declares that the entire Knight Order will give their all when the time comes. Nearby, a young knight named Clamroth diligently works on a piece of equipment. Werner picks up a transparent magic stone and explains that they are obtained from the corpses of magical creatures and are used to power magical tools. He likens it to items dropped in a game, but notes that due to cost and taxes, such tools are not common. Werner then asks Clamroth if he can use magic. Clamroth cheerfully confirms that he cannot use magic at all. Clamroth explains that anyone can use magical tools, but unlike magic, a person can't just release electricity from their body to attack or heal. Werner muses that there must be rules in place, as applying the laws of physics to magic seems illogical. Clamroth agrees, adding that a non-magic user can't just touch a magic stone and instantly create fire or heal. Werner recalls that magic is a consumable resource, and that magical power alone is not enough to interfere with physical phenomena without proper training. Ancient items are thought to be imbued with a lost form of self-sustaining magic, processed to achieve a creator's intended effect. He considers the possibility that unseen magic exists naturally all around them. Werner wonders how recovery potions restore magic, considering a hypothesis about limits to magic use within a certain range. A sudden realization strikes him. He abruptly stands up, announcing to a startled Clamroth that he's leaving to put together a proposal. Clamroth, confused for a moment, quickly affirms. As Werner departs, Clamroth calls out from the doorway, wishing him a safe trip. Werner is seen off by his companions. An aide greets Werner at the castle, but apologetically informs him that His Highness is in a meeting. Werner arrives at the Wine Kingdom Royal Castle and accepts the delay. He thinks to himself that the extra time is welcome, as he needs to prepare for his proposals regarding Fort Warisa and magic. While waiting, Werner feels a familiar nervousness. He reviews a report stating that the refortification of Fort Warisa is progressing steadily and should be finished by next week. The report notes that Marquess Knipe has been visiting the site, and the enthusiastic workers are making rapid progress. Werner is grateful for the updates, as it's reassuring to know the construction is on schedule. He reflects on the nervousness of fighting against time, especially since reality offers no restarts like in games. He finds that the harshness of the situation forces his mind to focus. His thoughts are interrupted when he is addressed as Viscount Zerfeld. Chancellor Falkenstein appears and apologizes for the wait. Werner is led into the room by the Chancellor. The Crown Prince apologizes for keeping him waiting, and a surprised Werner thanks him. The prince gets straight to the point, asking about the proposed group battle training exercises, which Werner confirms were highly effective. Before explaining further, Werner asks a question of his own. He needs to know how seriously Marquess Knipe took the warning that was previously conveyed to him. The Crown Prince replies that he would say the Marquess only half believes the warning. Werner acknowledges that this figures. He asks what they should do now. The prince turns the question back on him, asking for his suggestion. Werner realizes the prince is skillfully steering the conversation, likely already knowing what he is going to say. Werner feels tested, noting that the prince is an excellent superior whose quick thinking is almost frightening. He begins to explain his assessment honestly. He states that two things are crucial: the completion of Fort Warisa and Marquess Knipe's thorough preparation for a demon attack. He warns that if either of those two things is missing, the consequences will be dire. Werner believes it would be difficult to endure the demon army's invasion without both elements in place. The prince adds that this is especially true given the commoner workers involved in the repairs. Werner explains that while the knights and soldiers could hold their own, the non-combatants would be a major issue. The common laborers and other non-combatants would certainly panic in the event of an attack. Werner states that with the large number of non-combatants at Warisa, troops might have to be diverted to contain chaos. The worst-case scenario is that panic spreads to the soldiers and knights themselves. He laments that too many people are seriously underestimating this threat. He proposes deploying a strong military force near the fort under the pretext of training, which would be beneficial even if no attack occurs. If an attack occurs, Werner says the next best option is to prioritize the evacuation and protection of those who manage to escape. The prince asks if he's suggesting they not attempt a rescue. Werner admits he lacks confidence in a successful counterattack, and the prince agrees. Werner adds that it's a half-day's ride from Fort Warisa to the capital. This means there's a significant risk of being attacked on the way back. The prince sighs, saying he can't stand the thought of it. Werner notes the risk of the outside troops being attacked, but believes they can hold out if properly drilled. By splitting the forces, the troops inside the fort can focus on internal problems while the outside force protects civilians. Werner suggests that if one side gains an advantage, they might be able to aid the other. The prince concedes this would be ideal, and hopes it turns out that way. Werner voices his one remaining fear: the demon army attacking both the fort and the field troops simultaneously. However, he doesn't think this will happen. He reasons that they would more likely attack the capital at the same time, and if that happened, he would be powerless to stop it. He recalls that the capital's monster-repelling barrier was destroyed in the game, so it can't be relied upon. The prince suggests that the demons are likely using the attacks as intimidation, and would prioritize the fort to pressure human countries. The prince states his desire to help as many people as possible before escaping himself. Werner agrees, concluding that based on reports of Salznak's fall, the demon army's primary goal is intimidation. The prince concurs with his assessment. The prince poses a question: wouldn't it be more effective for the demons to attack after the fort is complete? Werner agrees, but says it's better if their training isn't wasted. The prince finds this reasonable, as the people would be unhappy if the fortress fell. Werner declares that their military will make every effort to rescue the common laborers. He adds that their survival will ease the people's anxiety. Chancellor Falkenstein states that while he hopes for the best, it's natural to consider the most reasonable outcome. The Chancellor confirms that this is the plan. The prince asks if this is what Werner desires, adding that if the fort is attacked, they can ensure there is no obligation for a rescue. The Chancellor asks if they should proceed with selecting personnel, and Werner agrees. Werner is terrified by how much the prince understands, as the prince commends him on his suggestions. The Crown Prince asks to move on to Werner's next proposal, and Werner agrees. Before him stand Chancellor Falkenstein and Royal Court Magician Vogt. Werner feels incredibly nervous, being an amateur in magic surrounded by such esteemed figures. The Crown Prince begins, stating there are two types of magical power, one in the human body and one in the environment. Werner concludes his presentation, internally wondering why the Crown Prince is still present. The magicians and the Chancellor find the hypothesis intriguing and agree it should be tested, and the Prince asks how they can verify it. Werner explains that he arrived at this hypothesis after investigating magic, which encompasses both magical and physical phenomena. He believes two types of forces are involved in its activation. Vogt enthusiastically gives credit to Viscount Zierfeld for the idea. Werner explains that as magic is used, power from both the body and the environment diminishes. To put it simply, he believes the number of magic users who can operate simultaneously is limited. Werner adds that he also wants to verify if there are rules for energy use between one large spell versus multiple smaller ones. As someone developing anti-magic measures, this is a crucial detail for him. He notes that if stronger magic is prioritized, they will need a completely new strategy. Vogt suggests they gather people in a set area, and the Chancellor adds that they should have them all use magic at the same time. Werner concludes that they will need to gather as many magic tools as possible and activate them all at once. The three officials listen intently, their expressions a mix of intrigue and serious consideration. After Werner leaves, the Chancellor wonders about the origin of his way of thinking, questioning if it's his father's education. The Prince believes it's more likely due to his innate qualities, and Vogt agrees he is different from his father. The nobles agree they don't want to put a promising young man in harm's way, and must decide who to entrust with the matter. The Prince states that he believes Duke Seifert is the right choice. The nobles agree there is no better choice, certain that with the Demon King's revival, the renowned Duke Seifert will agree to return. The Chancellor muses that while it would be ideal to hear from other veterans, he is sure the great Duke will be happy to help. He also acknowledges that the Viscount is quite talented in military strategy. The Chancellor remarks that the Viscount's approach is a bit different compared to the Duke's. The Crown Prince finishes his thought, suggesting it's quite similar. A long-haired noble walking with Werner agrees, saying, "That's right." The long-haired noble expresses his certainty that the two eccentric, selfless individuals will get along quite well. Werner continues walking down the ornate hall. A warrior woman cries out in alarm, questioning the sudden appearance of so many vampire hairs and wondering if it's a consequence of the Demon Lord's resurrection. Her companion, Feli, calmly suggests that either the scouting team missed them or the situation changed very recently. As more monsters appear, Feli senses that something is off, trying to explain that the sheer number of creatures isn't the real issue. Their gaze drifts towards the surrounding forest with a feeling of unease. A scout hiding in the bushes receives Feli's message. The information is relayed to his cloaked leader, who immediately gives orders to contact Lord Avant and the others. He grimly notes that while these monsters are weak individually, their sheer numbers will make them difficult to handle. His men praise his cunning plan to use their numbers to their advantage. Lord Avant laments that with nothing left to steal south of Salznak, they must find new prey to make a living. The plan is to have monsters attack travelers' escorts, allowing the bandits to seize whatever is left. With the plan set, Lord Avant rallies his men to begin the day's work. They burst from the trees and confront their targets, demanding they drop their belongings in exchange for their lives. The bandits are stunned into silence, their confident expressions turning to shock. Instead of a vulnerable merchant, they find themselves facing a large, well-armed, and composed group of people. The cloaked leader calmly issues an order to his companions: subdue their opponents, but do not kill them, and let none escape. Lord Avant acknowledges the command with a shout. With a roar, he and his men charge forward. The ensuing brawl is swift and decisive. While the group efficiently deals with the bandits, a butler calmly pours tea nearby, completely unfazed by the chaos. The defeated bandits are tied up. After the fight, the group relaxes over elegant teacups. The group members celebrate their victory, feeling alive after the skirmish. The butler serves them, explaining that unlike in the capital, tea is no luxury here. The butler adds that thanks to Sir Feli's early warning, they were able to send a handover notice in advance. Feli gratefully acknowledges that this foresight is why they can now enjoy a peaceful moment. Feli explains that a gift from someone they call Big Brother helped them gather crucial intelligence about local rumors, which expedited their work. The butler recalls a time when a gift, a necklace, was well received. A young man expresses surprise that Lord Avant even fought, but is glad no one was hurt, while the butler muses on Lord Werner's thoroughness. The young man passionately declares his disdain for those who profit from others' labor without contributing anything themselves. The young man excitedly points out that the skirmish was a perfect chance to test the performance of their new armor and weapons. He boasts that with such equipment, they might not even need escorts against mere bandits, an idea the butler gently discourages. The cloaked leader listens, silently pondering the grim state of the Wine Kingdom and what it implies for the neighboring land of Triot. He considers reports that parts of Triot are still peaceful, wondering if their leader is level-headed or simply carefree. The group agrees it was best to finish their job early, especially with the rising prices of high-grade equipment. The butler is relieved they have prepared equipment that will please Lord Werner. The conversation turns to Lord Werner, with one of them wondering what he is doing now. Feli playfully guesses that he's incredibly busy and offers to bet on it. The cloaked leader, a cautious man himself, refuses to bet on something so certain. The butler simply hopes their lord is getting some proper rest. On the Hildea Plains, south of the royal capital, various factions gather. Viscount Werner von Zerfeld is approached by a man who thanks him for his help on a previous occasion. The man introduces himself as Rheinisch, expressing his delight at working together again. Another knight, Degenkolb, also introduces himself, apologizing for participating as an individual this time. Werner acknowledges them both, taking in the growing assembly. A young noble, Avon Simon Crank, introduces himself to Werner for the first time. Werner recalls that Avon's father died during a recent stampede, and that Avon, though young-looking, is his successor. Avon states that his knight order has studied Werner's tactics and is determined to avenge his father's name. Degenkolb also expresses his eagerness to learn from the renowned Zerfeld house, making Werner realize the situation is escalating beyond his expectations. Count Chris Georg Chandel approaches, congratulating Werner on his recent appointment as captain of a 100-man unit, despite still being a student. The Count, known to be trusted by the Prime Minister, also notes Werner's involvement in magical experiments. He cheerfully remarks that he now has more exciting stories to tell his wife. Werner, feeling the weight of the attention, can only react with quiet apprehension. Werner's companion mentions that Count First personally requested Count Chandel's participation. This makes Werner wonder about the underlying motives. Nearby, two other knights comment that they cannot figure out the intentions behind this gathering. Werner, however, decides there is no point in overthinking it for now. A commander orders the first wave of the Mage Corps to take their positions. On his command, they unleash a powerful volley of magic. The force of the attack ripples through the air, startling the onlookers. The magical barrage obliterates its target. Werner observes the display, privately musing that this difference in power might be due to the randomness of a game-like system. While others are impressed by the mage's destructive power and honed skills, Werner remains analytical. He knows that against the true late-game enemies he is preparing for, this level of power would be insufficient. The commander then announces the beginning of the second experiment. Taking charge of the next phase, Werner orders the second mage unit to prepare. He instructs all units to move into position and ready their magic items, as the other commanders look on with surprise. A unit leader confirms that all are in position, ready for his command. Werner gives the order to activate all magic tools. Another wave of energy erupts from the field. The soldiers observing watch with rapt attention, their faces filled with awe at the power being unleashed. The second phase of the experiment concludes successfully, and the mages smile, pleased with the outcome. The mage commander instructs Werner and another lord to explain and report on the results. Werner calmly agrees to the request. A mage explains the experiment's hypothesis, that magic activation requires two types of mana, one from the human body and one from the environment. Werner wonders if it is wise to discuss such sensitive information so openly. Nevertheless, he decides to go along with it. The mage leader considers that this might be a deliberate leak or a sign of the Crown Prince's trust in this personally selected group. He continues, explaining that if the hypothesis is correct, consuming a large amount of environmental mana should affect magic activation. The mage leader elaborates that the experiment was also designed to see if environmental mana shows any preference. When Avon questions the term, Werner clarifies that preference is just a metaphor for their purposes. The goal was to activate many low-mana magic items while mages cast high-mana spells, to see if the limited environmental mana prioritized one over the other. The leader adds that preliminary tests have already established a baseline for how many mages can cast spells without a drop in power. The mage leader continues his explanation, noting that while there are still variables like weather and location to test, they are making progress. He confirms he brought just enough mages so that they could all cast at full strength. He then brings up a related discovery made by Viscount Werner. During the last stampede, goblins rarely used magic. A soldier recalls the common belief that this was due to the goblins being in a berserk state, a notion the mage leader confirms was held until now. The mage leader explains Viscount Werner's alternate theory. It wasn't that the goblins chose not to use magic, but that they simply could not. He suggests that when numerous goblins tried to cast spells, they drained the ambient mana, making magic unusable and explaining why the Royal Court Mage Corps struggled. A soldier recalls that the Mage Corps had indeed deployed more personnel than usual for the royal grandson's first battle. Werner reflects internally that with the right catalyst, new ideas naturally come together. One of the men wonders aloud why no one realized this before. Werner internally praises the brilliant insight, though he feels there's a deeper sense of wrongness to the situation. The nobles celebrate, confident that this discovery will give them an advantage in future stampedes and even in wars with other nations. The mage leader declares he will formally recommend and expedite research into disposable, high mana consumption magic tools. Werner is troubled that they are already thinking of human conflicts instead of the Demon King, though he privately wants the development to be rushed. This new technique is vital for neutralizing area of effect magic when defending the royal capital. A noble questions why the drop in firepower during group battles was never addressed, and the mage leader admits they always blamed it on enemy magic resistance. Werner thinks to himself that it's unsurprising no one considered magical obstruction, as they were focused on improving their own offensive and defensive capabilities. The mage leader adds that in a world that values individual prowess, it's only natural to focus on boosting attack or defense. A woman beside him asks how he came up with the idea, joking that most magicians are simple-minded. A knight announces they will move on to the next matter, leaving the experiment's verification to the others and telling everyone to prepare. Werner reflects on the world's preference for small, elite units and overwhelming individual power. He realizes that as this becomes more widely acknowledged, heroes like Mazel will have to carry an even bigger burden. The scene shifts to a village within the Wine Kingdom territory. A cloaked woman looks around cautiously before approaching a dilapidated building. Another young woman inside gestures for her to approach. A young girl is startled by the visitor's arrival. The visitor is introduced as Lily Harding. Hannah expresses her relief and offers Lily a thank you gift for a picture she had made. Lily is overjoyed, but she gently tells Hannah that she shouldn't come here too often. Hannah tries to return the art supplies and canvas she borrowed. She insists that Lily should keep them, as she has no use for them herself, but Lily protests. Lily's younger sister suggests she draw a picture of their family and send it. Hannah agrees, mentioning that she heard the hero is doing well and this could be a way to celebrate. Her sister is sure that Mazel would feel the same way, and Lily agrees to do it. Hannah adds that he once told her having her picture made him feel braver while they were apart. Hannah continues, saying Mazel must be lonely, but is cut off when Lily's sister suddenly calls out her name. Lily thanks Hannah and urges her to leave quickly. Hannah is grateful for the food and their talk. Hannah promises she will visit again. As she leaves, Hannah relays that her father thinks the chief is wrong but feels powerless, and she tells Lily not to push herself. Lily's sister peeks out and, seeing that it's clear, tells Lily to hurry. Lily quickly slips back inside her home. She overhears an angry man demanding that Mazel, his son, be called back to the village. The man angrily questions why Mazel is allowed to study abroad in the capital while the Demon King has returned. Distressed by what she heard, Lily takes a moment to compose herself. She finds a sealed letter. She looks down with a determined expression. Alone in the dim room, she considers the idea of drawing a picture of her family. After entrusting the verification of the magical experiment to the Mage Corps, the group made an early departure. Simultaneously, they began conducting group tactics training on the Hidia Plains. The exercise quickly devolved into chaos as knights on horseback struggled to coordinate. The soldiers were clearly exhausted and disoriented by the new tactics. Observing the training, a blonde commander deduces they are simulating monster battles with straw bundles, and his bearded companion notes the terrain could also be used for fake soldiers. The blonde commander points out how chaotic the field has become. His companion agrees, noting their struggle to coordinate even against non-threatening targets. Seaford explains this is what happens when soldiers are only used to fighting alone. The soldiers on the field shout in frustration, blaming each other for their mistakes. Seaford explains that these group strategies are not typically used against other knights, which is why the soldiers are struggling. He elaborates that this world values individual skill, and training professional soldiers is a demanding process where noble birth and status are paramount. Because noble knights are such valuable assets, there are established customs for their combat. Knights from less affluent families often make a living by capturing opponents and ransoming them for money. Seifert agrees with the blonde commander that fighting monsters is different. There's no need to capture them alive, allowing for more efficient damage-dealing tactics. Seifert explains that while ganging up seems efficient, the world's spirit of chivalry, which honors personal valor, means a knight must capture opponents in fair duels to survive. The bearded commander finds this logical, and Seifert expresses his hope that more people will come to understand the need for new tactics. The blonde commander considers the motivations of those participating in the training. He mentions that many of them have experienced the recent stampede, even if only indirectly. While some are likely present due to government orders, others are surely there because they sense that things have changed. Seifert thinks that demonstrating the effectiveness of group tactics in the upcoming battles against the demon army will persuade more knights and nobles to abandon their old ways. He steps forward, ready to begin the next phase of the training. Seifert announces that his own knight corps will now set the example. The assembled knights watch with anticipation. With a shout to begin, Seifert's corps springs into action. They expertly pin a straw bundle to the ground with their spears. The observing knights watch in stunned silence. The demonstration unfolds with a level of teamwork they had failed to achieve. Seifert explains his method. Because the country's nobles and knights have great pride and skill, you must demonstrate, explain, let them try, and offer praise. Otherwise, they will not be moved to act. The bearded commander is impressed. Believing their pride will be enough to drive them, Seifert gratefully accepts the compliment. Seifert anticipates that from these basics, each house's knight order will develop its own unique styles and specialties. He humbly states that he only knows the basics of modern military training and can only offer small suggestions based on his observations. He then turns to the crowd and calls for them to begin again. After a successful training session, the blonde commander congratulates the tired but accomplished knights. The bearded commander dismisses them, telling them to return to their camps and rest. He informs them that tomorrow's training will be at the same time and place, and any changes will be communicated individually. He then assigns Viscount Zerfeld and Lady Hermine the task of securing water supplies from nearby villages. Viscount Crank and Sir Rhinish are given a separate assignment, much to Crank's annoyance, before the commander formally dismisses everyone. Lady Hermine internally reasons that pairing young nobles from neighboring territories for errands is a logical decision, as they are not enemies. She and Seifert professionally agree to work together, with Seifert suggesting they start their water supply mission early tomorrow morning. As she acknowledges his plan, she addresses him directly as Viscount Zierfeld, her expression thoughtful. The next morning dawns at the first family encampment. Lady Hermine's attendants help her put on her armor. She wishes them a good morning. One of her attendants returns the greeting. However, the attendant's expression is somber and concerned. The dark-haired attendant gently takes Lady Hermine's hand, pointedly addressing her. Lady Hermine asks if something has happened, while another attendant wonders what her companion is talking about. The attendant asks if Lady Hermine truly believed she would not notice her distress. Lady Hermine falls silent, unable to respond. Her attendants watch her with concern, sensing something is wrong before she departs on her mission. Lady Hermine apologizes to her attendant, Sophie, for causing her to worry. Sophie reassures her it is not a problem. Seeing through the facade, Sophie asks directly what happened between Hermine and Viscount Zerfeld. Hermine acknowledges that Sophie has figured her out, as Sophie reminds her that she has been by her side for a long time. Sophie listens intently. Hermine admits that the matter is something that brings shame to her family, house first. Sophie begins to recount the history she heard from her father about what happened between their families. Hermine recalls the tragic story of Lady Judith and Viscount Zerfeld's older brother, which they learned as students. Sophie continues, explaining that everyone praised the man as an admirable older brother who died protecting Seifert. Hermine states that her knowledge of the events ends there. She had assumed the engagement between her sister and the Viscount was called off due to the age difference. However, Sophie reveals the truth was not so simple. She explains that after the death of the Viscount's older brother, it was House Zierfeld that requested to end the engagement. Sophie explains that an investigation revealed the true reason was not the age gap. She recounts the cruel words of Hermine's relative, who celebrated the broken engagement, declaring she wouldn't have to marry into a civil servant family. The revelation leaves Hermine wide-eyed with shock. As Hermine reacts, Sophie reassures her. Hermine admits that while she felt she should doubt Seifert, she simply couldn't. Hermine realizes that Viscount Zerfeld must have known about the insult all along. His past behavior now makes perfect sense to her. She feels ashamed, recalling that he saved their lives and offered tactical advice despite the terrible incident. She had even asked him for instruction, completely unaware of the history between their families. Hermine can only feel shame for her ignorance. Sophie reminds her that on top of everything, the Count has ordered her to become closer with him. Hermine calls her father's demand unreasonable, but knows she has no choice but to try. She questions how she could possibly get along with the brother of the person her family insulted. She believes he probably doesn't even want to see her. As Sophie starts to speak about Lady Judith, Hermine quiets her. With a look of grim resolve, Hermine states that to the Viscount, she is simply a member of the first family, nothing more and nothing less. Her duty is clear, regardless of her personal feelings. The scene shifts to a rural village where soldiers are drawing water from a well. The village chief sighs about the military exercises but grants them permission to take water. Seifert's companion thanks him for his cooperation. Seifert explains that their village's wells are shallow and cannot offer much, but he assures the chief they will only take what they need. He then asks if there are other water sources nearby. The chief informs them of a stream to the southwest and a lake to the east. Seifert asks for a map or directions. The chief points the way to a river about 3 hours away. He also mentions a spring that is harder to reach, offering to carry water for them if necessary. Seifert acknowledges that procuring supplies locally is common for multi-day exercises. The military exercise requires a vast amount of water for its 300 participants. Transporting it all from the capital is unfeasible, making local procurement the best option. Seifert asks the village chief how he would like to be compensated for their trouble. The chief thoughtfully requests payment in gold coins. Seifert is surprised by the request for gold, but the chief, prompted by another villager, confirms it. The villager adds that the well has been running lower each year, so they would appreciate extra compensation. Seifert agrees to take their troubles into account. He offers them payment, which the villagers gratefully